Good afternoon, everybody. It is Thursday, January 25th, 2024, and it is 12 p.m. and the City Council has a quorum present in the City Hall conference room. As authorized by Section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code, this meeting may be convened into closed executive session for the purpose of seeking confidential legal advice from the city attorney on any agenda item herein. The City of Rowlett reserves the right to reconvene, recess, or realign the work session or hold executive session or order of business at any time prior to adjournment. And process for public input, if you're not able to attend in person, you can complete the public input form on the city's website by 3:30 or 9:30 a.m. the day that that's already passed. For in-person comments, registration forms and instructions are available at the second door of the City Hall conference room. And our first item is presentation on the status of capital improvement projects. Is there any public input before we start? Anybody want to speak? All right, come on up.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Good afternoon. This is an update, periodic update of our CIP program. So we've organized this basically into bond type years and types. So the first project up is Merritt Road Interconnector, because that was funded through both the 2015 and 2011 bond elections. 21, excuse me. And the project right now is in design. We have an anticipated start date, worst case of 2028. But we are, most of that is due to possible environmental study impacts. We have had a kickoff with TxDOT recently, and we think that date can be moved up.
Okay, I was going to ask on that. You know what? I'll wait.
Okay.
Wait.
I forgot. I was going to invite you all to interrupt and ask as the questions come up. I think this is not a long presentation, but it's up to you.
Okay, I'll ask then.
Okay.
And I think you pretty much answered it already, but the initial timeline or the anticipated start date that I recall was 2027. I was just curious why it was pushed to 28 or 29 as a possible anticipated start date.
That is our latest estimate based on the worst case environmental steps that may need to be taken. The worst case being that we would have to get an individual permit from the Corps in order to get the road in. And there are some stringent environmental tasks that are associated with that permit. But TxDOT has indicated that it's very likely that we would not build that route, and that both there and the EPA or the FWA can be shortened.
Okay, and also just a reminder to everybody here that I think the reason for the potential requirements of an environmental study is due to the surface transportation block grant that we received in the amount of $15 million. I just wanted to throw that out there. Okay. Thank you.
So in the 2015 bond election, Proposition 2 involved parks. There are still 2 projects left on that proposition. Springfield Park improvements, some shoreline improvements that need to be completed. We are looking at some options there, and the nature trail improvements. The parking lot improvements are under evaluation, and we do need to do some signage, which is currently in design.
Let's stop here.
Yep.
Okay, so the nature trail originally had 94,000 in the bond. They spent 50, roughly per spent 50 on doing, because the trail itself is degrading. Fabric's up, it's eroding. It's been that way for 4 years, it's kind of why I'm here. $50,000 was spent kind of on the back end of the trail to put new decomposed granite and surface rock draining. They didn't. They only spent $50,000. Why they mobilized? They had people. I guess it's a question for you, but it sort of drives me crazy. They were there at $38,000. There's more than enough to do. They mobilized, and then they want to spend $50,000. So somebody needs to get a handle on one, how this money is being spent, and the parking lot absolutely needs to be done, but so does the trail. The trail has to have money thrown at it to fix it. So.
I think this past year or 2 years ago, there were some.
Yeah, $50,000.
Yeah, we did some trail improvements.
That's kind of my squawk here is why didn't they, they had a construction crew out there doing this and they only spent half the money. I mean, you got paid to mobilize and it just seemed like a waste of money, so I just want to squawk about it.
Point taken. Go back one, sorry. Sure.
You know, the disc golf improvement, that's moved though. And so you're gonna be able to spend the whole $112,000 on a sprinkler park.
Correct.
Okay, we're not improving the disc golf. That's all. It's just the shoreline improvements.
That is our task, yes.
Yeah, the description is what was the original
In the
understanding of the scope of the project.
And just, I guess to clarify going forward, we're not gonna wait almost a decade to move on these projects. Or are we? Going forward.
Yes.
Again,
Okay, another project is alley reconstruction, which was also funded originally in 2015, but also in the 2018 and 2021 elections. That's why it's combined here on one slide. We have done all the projects through those bond elections, and all the projects are complete at this point. There is some remaining balance as well. So in 2018, Proposition A concerned streets and alleys. We have a list of projects here. Downlock Shady traffic signal, that is currently under design. The turn lanes throughout the city which are grouped into one group of 3 and one group of 2. That is also under design. We do anticipate a start date soon for the 66 turn lanes. Miller Road reconstruction is under construction, and the Lakeland Heights Street reconstruction has been completed since we last came to you with an update. Cheezel Road reconstruction is currently under design.
Question on the Downrock Shady traffic signal. It says, it was adopted bond budget. Did we move funds to fund that? Because I don't recall us including that. We did?
Yes, we did.
Okay, I was curious because I didn't recall us funding that in a past bond, but I'm glad that it's been covered. So I just want to clarify this.
And in 2018, the Proposition B was parks, Herforth Park Phase 1, which has been completed. Lakefront at Pecan Grove Park, that design is pending an evaluation of our options there. There was a bid that came in over budget. Twin Star Park improvements, the last item on there is the irrigation that needs to be completed. And the trail construction, we see Lakeland Heights trail was finished, and now we are in construction with the Garner Fuqua Trail. The community park improvements, where the sports field upgrades were basically the item that needed to be addressed. That has yet to be completed, and we're looking at some of the design options there as well. There's also some sports field construction, a more general line item from the bond. This has to do with the hockey rink at Katy Park. And that too is under evaluation due to some subgrade issues. And the Environmental Learning Center, the preliminary design has been completed. We are moving to the design.
So regarding the ELC, just for reference staff, I would like to have a work session with Keep Out Beautiful and the council to discuss this project and the potential for moving forward. I would suggest that we not spend any more money until we've had that conversation with KRB to determine the future of the ELC, whether it's actually going to happen or not. Thank you.
Do you have a time period, maybe within the next month or two?
Just whenever, there's not a rush, just whenever it fits.
Let's say maybe in the next 2 months.
Okay.
This is something we need to get off, I'm sorry.
Question, on the sports field, one thing that's not listed there, neither if it needs to be on the next budget, but all of the shade cloth and all of the shading areas of the baseball stadium, and there's a bunch of it, all needs to be replaced, fencing, you know. So I don't know if we need to put that in next budget or if there's funds here. That's I mean, it just makes it look so bad, everything ripped and nasty, and it's just, it needs to be fixed.
I think there are funds there that we can look at once kind of the major parts of the scope of the initial proposition are fulfilled. There's possibly some additional funds remaining, and that we can add that to the list.
Well, I would consider this a pretty top priority.
Understood, but we have to make sure we met the original intent of the proposition. Once that's done, this can.
Jeff, do you have any kind of estimated completion date on the food court trail? Just
I'm gonna have to lean on
So
Dina, our CIP
we just
manager.
got that, it's a conduct the calendar days, the date.
I can do that, man.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, moving to the 2021 bond election, Proposition A, paving and drainage. The Lakeland Heights Phase 2 appeared on this bond, and that too is complete since we last came to you with an update. Concrete pavement replacement was on the bond. That is an ongoing project. The Long Branch Creek erosion control is in design. The anticipated construction date is to be determined, but we are very close. I expect to get that within this quarter or next. Total Business Park reconstruction, Phase 1 and 2 is in design. We expect that construction start date to be in the quarter 3 of this year. Country Air Estates is in construction, Phase 1. And then the East Industrial Street improvements, that too is under design. Utilities are doing their design of their relocations at present. So that construction date has to be determined yet, based on their schedule.
I wanted to make a quick, or I guess really a question. Lakeland Heights reconstruction phase 2, due to previous staff's lack of oversight of that project, we allowed the contractor to leave, and with several failed panels quickly after they left. So there are several failed panels with sprawling cracks through them from this project.
Warranty work.
And also failed drainage, so it doesn't drain properly in certain areas. Water collects in certain parts. So there's 122,000 remaining balance. I just wanted to throw it out there that there could be some additional work that needs to be done to fix those issues at Phase 2 Lakeland Heights. That's it.
Proposition C of 2021, the Joint Fire Police Station at Sapphire Bay. That was a design funding that has been completed, and the COs that were issued for construction is also shown on this slide. Now that the design is complete, the station is in construction mode. GMP came to council.
Yep.
2023, that is the facilities and park bond election. The public safety facilities for almost 64 million, the animal shelter for 8.4 million, and the Perfect Park for 4 million. Those projects are all in design now. So moving to water and sewer revenue bond projects, we have the Merritt Road 36 and 30-inch water line. That project is in design. The Dow Rock 24-inch water line, also in design. The 66 Dow Rock water and sewer improvements, that was where we relocated those utilities so that Textron can move into the intersection. That project has been completed since we last came to you, and you probably know that the intersection is under construction by Textron. Rowlett Road Pump Station, this is an addition to that station with a new pump. That project is in design, and the 3 million gallon ground storage tank, also at the Rowlett Road Pump Station, is in design as well. There is water line dead end looping. That is a project we're looking at dead ends throughout the city. That project is in design. The 66 reconstruction of a sewer line that goes up that corridor is in design. We anticipate construction starting this year, Ward 3. And the force main along 66 that we've had problems with, that is currently being redesigned. And the College Park lift station abandonment, the Winter Circle, and Toller Ridge lift station abandonment are all in design. And the Toller Bay lift station replacement is in design as well.
2 questions.
Yes.
One, the Winter Circle Total Ridge, where exactly is that list? I mean, I live over there, I'm trying to remember where that's at. Is that off of Indian Trail?
It's off of Faulkner.
It is off.
And
I know the Toller Bay 1 replacement, that's Faulkner and almost Rowlett Road, where the Encore easement is.
Okay, I know where that,
That's where that one
I
is.
thought that was all Encore, that's the lift station.
yeah,
Okay,
The
so
Winter Circle is
Yeah,
more to the west of that, I believe.
it's straight behind us. But, okay, so for both of those, Winter Circle and Toller Bay 1, you're talking about, acquisition right away for both. What exactly does that entail?
Because we have to convert the lift station is what pumps the sewage up to another point in the system where it can then flow by gravity. Well, now we have to reroute that sewage through a gravity line, so we need to acquire easements for that purpose.
Where are those easements going to go? Are those going into existing utility easements, or are those going through people's yards, or?
Typically through side yards or open space HOA lots. It depends on the lift station, the configuration of the lots and the streets. Could be in right of way. It's not all in easement, but sometimes it is in easement.
Have owners been?
Well, that's what we are doing.
Because the house that's right there where that lift station, that's been sold. And so there's new people. I just want to know what the impact is on residents.
On that particular one, I don't know that I have information as to if we've contacted that particular homeowner yet, but that is part of the procedure, is contacting the homeowners and negotiating an easement.
I had a question as well.
Go ahead.
And the water line dead end looping, is this going to, how much of the dead ends is this going to take care of? 100%, 10%?
Well, I know that, but I don't think it's gonna be 100%. It's gonna be more than 10%. Our goal, our goal is Our goal is between the 50 and 90% range. Again, you know, there are easements that may be needed, there's funding that is an issue, of course, and then whether it's even some dead ends which have a fire hydrant on them, at the end of it may just wind up staying.
So I think the correct answer is this isn't going to fix any dead end water lines. This is to design or study where our dead ends all are, and then to come up with a plan to loop the system.
So this is design.
I don't know that this is gonna fix any of it. I mean, because 892 is already spent on design alone.
It's a, as the mayor said, it's a concept on how to fix the dead end.
It's not actually completing any physical work. It's to understand where all of our dead ends are and a plan to loop the entire system. And then you'll have the real cost of what the physical labor will be, which will be way more than $800,000 or $990,000. I mean, it'll be a phased-in, multi-year plan.
And the construction cost will come back to
Question on the 66 force main. So just wanted to clarify, this is regarding sanitary sewer?
Yes.
Okay. And you know, we're pretty well aware, I think, here that line has been the most problematic in terms of the multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars we had to spend on emergency repairs. I'm just saying that in that I would like to see, if possible, some rush on this design
So, yes.
because of its continued issues.
We're at 60%. We've had meetings with the design consultant as recently as, I want to say 3 weeks ago. And the focus of those conversations has been easement acquisition and working with Encore. Encore has been, they've been relatively cooperative, but they do have some clearance standards that that we're trying to work through, and they've worked through those now, and so they're ready to go back and adjust their design and move forward.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to express the desire to go a little faster here, if possible. Okay, that's all I have on this. Anybody else on this slide? All right, thank you.
So recently, we've added the Martin Drive pedestrian crossing signal as a project, and the CDBG alley reconstruction near Dana Drive as a project. These are not bonded projects. Martin Drive is a grant from DART, and CDBG alley, of course, is CDBG funds. Both those projects. That concludes the, be happy to answer any additional questions you may have.
Council, any other questions?
Not a question, but a remark. There are a lot of projects we have that are in design right now. There are a lot of projects on this list with a date of TBD, start date. And that is fairly concerning, given that we're getting ready to ask taxpayers for additional funds to do additional infrastructure projects. There are some projects in here where it almost seems like we course corrected along the way and had to realign our vision for what we're doing. I understand that, but we need to be really clear about what is the long-term vision for each of these projects. When are they going to get started? When can people anticipate seeing their tax dollars being put to work? So I don't have an ask out of that necessarily, aside from we just need to tighten things up.
And I think they're working on it. So.
Quick question, rookie question probably, so bear with me here. Spent a little time digging on the update back in May that y'all gave on the CIP projects and all that, and there was a funding gap, almost $4 million for the Merritt Road interconnector, but I don't see that reflected on the updated one. Is that part of the, do we get more money for it from the what you were talking about, Mayor, from the,
That was
is that totally separate?
No, the 14 million, and then we already allocated funding for design, and then the 4 million was left over that had to be filled, but we,
Has that been
I
filled?
thought the 4 million was shortened due to some reallocation from DART.
yes.
And
is that-
then there was still a little bit left
Yeah.
gap, and that's going to be addressed in the
Okay,
uh,
great.
proposal.
Thank you.
So Jeff, one more question, I'm sorry. Now, I know you've rolled together all the streets and, all the alley reconstructions and all those projects from the various bond programs. And out of that, we still have about 850,000 that's left.
Yeah.
Do we have that prioritized for completion of alleys in the immediate future? Or are we waiting until there's more funding through another bond cycle to continue?
It would be my anticipation that the 852,000 that you see left that we start already looking at, are there additional projects that we can do with that funding? And try to get that funding spent, that would be my recommendation and something we're gonna be looking into.
Okay, yeah, I think our residents would appreciate that because I know there's a lot of alleys that need attention. And I don't know how far 850,000 will go, but I know it will go somewhere.
2 alleys, but that's still 2 alleys.
Yeah.
2 or 3 alleys.
Thank you.
Still something.
Thank you.
All right. Our next item is item 2B, discussion of debt management strategies. And our assistant city manager, Christoph Bauer, will be taking the hot seat.
So, Mayor,
Yes.
before Christoph starts, I feel it's important to kind of contextualize this presentation for council and even to some degree for the public. And while we've had conversations privately about some of what they're going to hear, Christoph has got a very robust, comprehensive presentation, but I think it is important, as I said, to contextualize this. And really to answer the question, why are we doing this? Why did I ask for this meeting? Why are you here in the afternoon? You recall when I started in June and began getting immersed in the budget process, I kind of mentioned to the council that there were some practices I observed in our budgeting that I felt were deleterious to the city's financial health and really, especially the general fund. You know, we talked about some of the future perils that would have awaited us. And folks may have thought that that was being an alarmist, but we were able to show you, even in our budget deliberations, the numbers specifically. I think the way we've done our business, particularly the way we've managed kind of short-term capital obligations, we have placed those in our general fund and funded them through capital leases. And I mentioned that at the time, as well as some other things that I thought we needed to recalibrate. To that end, he's going to give you this presentation. And I want to say this, there's some things that I want you to try to take from this presentation. Because when taken in total, they'll have some benefits here. It will increase our ability to fund maintenance and operations, and that's paramount. It's going to increase our debt capacity. And lastly, it could allow us to be more nimble enough to capture previously unrealized capital capacity. So there are 3 things that we're kind of presenting: paradigm shift in how we do our budgeting, specifically related to what we've called in the past cash or general fund maintenance capital items. There's going to be a new way Christoph's going to talk to you, and Christoph and Mike are going to talk to you about how we structure our debt. And then last thing, we're going to talk to you and ask for your consideration on the practical utilization of alternative debt instruments. I say that we're not asking for any decisions today. And from this conversation today, we will ask for additional special meetings from you, because this topic is ultimately going to lead us to your hopeful call for a bond election. But I wanted to set the stage because Christoph's got a lot of good information. There are really 3 things we want you to take from this, and I'll turn it over to Christoph from here.
All right, Christoph Bauer, Assistant City Manager. Those of you I haven't met, this is Michael Cohen. He's our debt manager. And Michael is an amazing resource. I've worked in other organizations and very rare to have this kind of expertise. He comes out of the banking industry, and he likes to confuse people with
Wall Street genius here.
Analysis paralysis.
He's been a great resource in putting this together. And as the manager has said, you know, we're really talking to you about paradigm shift. There's numbers in here, but again, those numbers are all just estimates. They're all illustrative to kind of help you understand the concepts that we're putting forward, but different approaches. And it's really about the models and the paradigms that we're really trying to introduce to you today. this is the kind of the concepts we'll go over. We'll start off with property tax. Of course, for some of you, this is old news, but we want to make sure that everybody has the same sort of foundation. Property tax in Texas has, really this is the general fund area, right, has two different components, the maintenance and operation component and the interest and sinking fund component. And you have different authority as a council to manage those under Texas law. The maintenance and authority one is restricted based on how much it can grow. So on an annual basis, they look at the revenue generated and it can grow only by 3.5% plus any new development in your community. You also have the ability to do a voter approval to go past that amount at the election. And there also is this topic of unused increment. I'll go over that a little more here in a second. The INS is less restricted. Basically, if you issue authorized debt, you get to set that rate or whatever is appropriate to cover that debt. So you have the ability to manage that you can choose based on how much debt you issue, and it'll move to cover that debt payment. Unused increment was this model that had been used in the past, and used fairly successfully, but if you lowered your M&O rate below the voter approved rate, you saved that increment, and you could use it in a future year should you need it in that year. That law has changed, and here's the formula. And Michael and I have been trying to figure out how that formula works. We have not yet. But I think the two things that we did agree on is that one, we don't know how it's going to work, but we do know that it's going to be much less useful than it has been in the past. And the increment that could be available to you to save for a future day is going to be much smaller. So that puts more of a challenge for us as an organization to try and create opportunities utilizing the INS rate to create flexibility within the M&O rate. And that's part of what we're trying to bring you today, is talk about how we can revise that debt allocation within that INO, talk to you about debt design, and then how that might impact our CFP investments. So debt capacity in the past, that conversation, if you look at sort of how we've done debt in the past, we've got geo bonds as the vast majority of our debt portfolio. There are other ways you can issue debt, and of course is controlled by state law. If you're going to do geo bonds, general obligation bonds, those have to be voted or approved. You can then issue those for a number of years, up to 30 years. Is that a maximum? Or you could go a little further than that?
You could go further than 30 years. However, the incremental interest costs associated going beyond 30 years, there's less incentive to do so.
You know, there are also certificates of obligation. There's a specific set of allowed uses, purposes for certificates of obligation. So you can't use them for everything, but there is a list of things you can use it for. And then as the additional complexity, if you use it for some things, you can't actually use INS rates to pay it back. So you can issue it, for example, for a library, but you can't repay it through an INS for a library. You have to use general obligation or M&O funds to repay it. You should see it for a library. So those weird nuances. But there's also tax notes and private placement. So there's an opportunity to use different kinds of debt that allow you to perhaps manage your debt portfolio a little bit more dynamically. So if you look at the past practice has been to issue debt, basically you place it on the ballot about every 3 years. You had the last vote back in 2023 where you authorized up to just a little bit over $76 million to build some facilities there. That's planned in 3 tranches. We've already issued the first, and that was to be supported by a 10-cent increase in the INS over that period of time. That's shown in this chart in the last 2 years. So we've already increased that INS rate for 2024, and there's planned increases for 25 and 26. That's kind of the basis of the analysis you're going to see moving forward. Now, city issued COs can be issued for the same purposes that you voted here, so there is really an option of deciding whether you want to go GO to a vote or whether you want to do CO potentially not a vote. Current practice is basically to use capital lease debt or cash fund a lot of our operational capital, things like fire trucks, other vehicles, equipment, things like, trailers or something like that, we've been using leases for each of those. Now, that lease means that you're entering into a lease contract for each piece of equipment. Those lease contracts have some complexity along with them. They have an interest rate, which is imputed, and right now that's all coming out of your M&O budget. If you move it to the INS rate, basically you're freeing up funds in that M&O tax rate for other purposes. And it also gives you an opportunity, since you have some short-term debt with some long-term debt, we'll illustrate this in a second, the ability to manage that portfolio to stabilize your INS rate. So you can pick a target rate and really use a combination of strategies through debt design to keep that at that target. It also removes that lease complexity. Again, if you have a lease for a lot of your equipment, then if you have a vehicle that needs to be replaced early, you're going to renegotiate that lease, you get different payment schedules. There's a lot of complexity that goes along with that kind of transaction on a regular basis. This is kind of an example. This year's budget included $250,000 for the first lease payment on a 7-year lease for fire and emergency medical equipment. So that's going to be paid over 7 years through a lease. There are some, good reasons to do that. In that part of that sort of lease agreement was some warranty coverage and some maintenance coverage. But all of those things can also be negotiated into a one-time purchase contract that is supported by a certificate of obligation or other debt issuance. So that's similar to, again, all the things like listed here, mentioned earlier, police vehicles, public works vehicles, equipment generators, etc. All of those are currently being done through individual lease contracts, which are negotiated on a case-by-case basis. So the proposal would be to move something like this, and it includes things like heart monitors, etc., things that are listed there, over through a certificate of obligation. We would actually purchase it through cash now, and then do a refunding resolution or reimbursement resolution, and bring back debt issuance later to the council. So it's kind of you pay cash up front, you accumulate a pile of those kinds of purchases, and then because you don't want to issue just $1.7 million worth of debt, it's inefficient and costly. You want to issue things between $5 and $10 million worth of debt in order to make those transaction costs efficient. So bring that to you toward the end of the year, and then you would authorize the debt to cover those payments that were made, or those cash acquisitions that were made previous in the year. Scored by our RNS, and that one change, for example, would reduce general fund expenditures this year by $250,000. Your first debt payment will be due till next year, so that's kind of a one-time change. We'll kind of go for that. If you kind of were to do this for all of our current capital eligible expenditures in our M&O, and you were pretty aggressive with it, and I want to sort of reinforce that. This would be kind of the most aggressive transition. This would be the way it would work out. You see over here, sort of free M&O money jumps from about $1.5 million this year up to about $4 million. That cost, of course, that cost moves over to your INS rate over time. It doesn't disappear. It just transitions from M&O funds to INS funds. This is kind of an illustration of how that works with the current paradigm. And the current paradigm is where we're using what we call level debt payment, where it's kind of like your mortgage, right? You pay the same mortgage payment every year except when they redo your escrow account, right? And it changes. But it's basically a level payment, and you spread it out over 20 years. You can see that kind of in the way these lines sort of pile up on top of each other in this graph. The light blue one down the bottom is looking at sort of moving those INS costs over. Those, again, the most aggressive approach to that would increase over a period of time as we move over more, and our investment in that area increases. So if you were to do this without any other changes, it would create a little bit of a debt capacity crunch, because we currently have $63 million planned for the next bond election, and this would use up some of that capacity. That's what this indicates. That basically you only have about $44.7 million available if you didn't do anything else.
And that's if you were to move all capital items in M&O to INS at one time.
That's correct.
That would be your crunch.
Everything eligible, the most aggressive moves, if we could do it, this would be crunch. That's not necessarily what we're writing. So again, this is sort of the current practice versus what's possible for us we sort of move away from that just level payment option, use some tailored debt option where we can either defer some principal or adjust that principal over time. We really have a lot of flexibility here in Texas that a lot of the states that I've been in don't, to allow us to issue debt in ways that allow us to take up or use up or manage that debt payment on a regular basis. As long as we have a portfolio that gives us more flexibility than the currently looking at. And one of those ways to look at it is that we could take, for example, the current plan, 23 bond issue, move it from 20 years to 30 years. We could take the next tranche of a bond that we're looking at in 24, defer that principal a little bit, and we can create about $80 million of capacity next time we're looking at it. Some portion of that would be used up by how much we move out of the current NREL funds over. And that's a discussion. How much do we want to move? How fast do we want to move it? And how much capacity do we want to create? And this, again, this is an example. Certainly there's an opportunity, and I was extremely creative. We can challenge it in a number of different ways to try, again, it's about what the council wants to achieve. So debt portfolio, again, you get that sort of diversity of short and long-term debt, something you can manage on an annual basis. This is kind of an example. So it shows, the dotted line up top is a INS rate. The goal here was, as it was already planned, to move up over the next 2 years, to set that as the target rate, and then manage it over time. You've got the light blue, which is sort of on transfer CapEx to move from M&O to INS. And then you have the remaining 2023 election bonds for sitting in there. The top becomes the capacity that we create through managing. Questions about?
Yes. I have the hard questions that my constituents are going to be asking me. And there are several, but you mentioned this is sort of like a mortgage. Now, everyone who has a mortgage or has taken out a mortgage knows that if you get a 30-year mortgage versus a 20-year or 15-year mortgage, you pay more in interest. So, how much more would this cost us to move it to a 30-year from a 20-year? And I know you don't have hard numbers.
Right. So, and that's, as I'm sure you all understand, some time value in mind, right? So it's not just about the interest cost we're balancing here. It's also about inflation and what's it going to cost us for a fire engine next year versus we can buy it this year. In fact, we've seen a dramatic increase in fire engines. That's another early day. So it's not just about the interest cost, which you're absolutely right. You spread out your debt longer, your interest cost is going to go up. And it really depends on whether your interest, your market where your interest rates are going up or going down. All those things are complex parts of this analysis that we need to do on a case-by-case basis, so you understand that as we're making decisions. But the other piece is looking at, what are your needs today? Now, we're going to talk a little bit about sort of how spending dollars today can save future dollars. So it's not just your interest expense that you're looking at. You're also looking at what your road maintenance expenses moving forward, what your vehicle cost moving forward is. So I guess we would encourage the community and the council to look not just at interest expense, but also look at what we're trying to achieve through making that investment in our road maintenance investments in our vehicle.
And just to clarify too on that note, I don't think the recommendation is to have a 30-year note for everything. Rather, your major capital assets like a facilities and certain roads that would have a 30-year, major roads would have a 30-year lifespan, but not everything.
No, not everything. And it's really about making those decisions that make sense. What is the useful life? The other reason why you spread your home mortgage over 30 years, you don't pay that off in a lifetime. Of course, now I'm getting older, I'm 15-year mortgage. So you make that judgment based on the investments you're going to make. And people expect the same. We're going to bring you 2-year debt, 7-year debt, 5-year debt, and some 30-year debt. And the whole idea here is to do just that. Actively manage our debt, take a look at it, analyze it, see what's happening with interest rates. Maybe if there's a higher interest rate mortgage, just like you do with your own loan, you need to refinance. So maybe we need to pay off some higher interest debt with some lower interest debt that is available in the marketplace. It's really about taking what has been a fairly simplistic approach to that debt and having a more analytical, complex approach to it. In order to do that, you need to have more diversity in your work.
I got a question. And I may have misunderstood it, but your proposal, does your proposal place a greater reliance on issuance of COs?
That would be part of our recommendations.
Well,
And if
I think we,
I'm sorry. I was gonna say, that's the last part of the conversation, but you're correct. It does involve the issuance of COs, and Christoph's gonna talk about that more, but you are correct.
we'll circle back to
Okay,
that.
we'll circle
discussion.
back, I'm just not crazy.
Understood, and part of this is a conversation, and I said this earlier, we wanna see how you feel, so that we can, our job is to try to bring you solutions and answers to the problems, and the problem is, we have over $100 million in street maintenance obligations right now. And so, again, whatever the council decides, we'll try to work around, but what we're simply trying to do today is give alternative strategies to, as Christoph said, what's been really a significant amount of money being managed very simplistically, and there are ways that we can do it in a different fashion that may create additional capacity.
Yeah, and I'm not fundamentally opposed to COs, I mean, we obviously approved the CO, but we looked at that, the high risk of not being able to respond with a fire response out of Santa Fe Bay prompted us to do that as opposed to waiting and putting that to the voters. I think that was a valid reason. I don't want to routinely use COs.
So on that, since it's been brought up now, there's not a recommendation to do a CO for everything. Rather, the things that we would normally pay out of M&O for cash. So, which is the point of this conversation has been, which is we obligate our M&O to a lot of responsibilities toward capital assets. When a better business practice is to shift those capital assets to our INS fund. With that, those items that we would normally pay out of M&O, like I had a list here, like fire trucks, like striker equipment for EMS, equipment for police, armor, things like that. I think that is the proposal for where to utilize the CO, because that's something that we would normally not ask people.
And that makes perfect sense. And if we as council go that way, we need a massive education to our citizens whenever you.
If I can offer this, so one slight difference, when you think about the debt, you normally think about geo debt. Gotta go to the voters because we're trying to do this big project. Something to keep in mind. You mentioned the striker equipment and these other things. So the analysis that Christoph is giving you showing $14 million of M&O debt, as we're calling our CapEx debt, over 3 years. 11 million of that is fire equipment. That's not besmirching the fire. It's just, we're going to buy that. The city's going to spend that money. You're not going to go to the voters. You're going to authorize us to spend that money in the M&O budget because you do it every year anyway. This isn't new debt obligation. It's simply a different way of paying for it. That's all.
Moving it from leases,
That's it.
and those of you who had experience with leases, you don't always get the best interest rate with a lease. You don't always have the best flexibility coming out of a lease. They can be complex documents, and moving that from that lease environment into our debt.
And I think that's what we need to focus on in trying to educate the public.
Education will be.
That we're not saying, because people are gonna look at it as analogous to their budgets, their household budgets. And they're gonna say, well, you're taking on debt, you're running up your credit card instead of paying cash for this, so all the financial advisors, household financial advisors will tell you don't do that. Don't take on a bunch of debt, pay cash. And we have to make them understand that what we're doing now is not paying cash with no interest. What we're doing now is leasing and all the costs that come with it.
A couple just highlight this, and to that point, I'm assuming some of our peer cities do a more sophisticated approach to debt management.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Is there some best practices that would, that we can kind of show? Because I think Dave Ramsey is a great way to manage household finances, but for more sophisticated, it's a little tough to do that. So I get that, but I assume there's some sort of levers on where to pull for COs. To your point, I agree. I think you can't just go and spend money willy-nilly. That's what the federal government does. I don't think Rowlett should do that. But I'm assuming there's some sort of measurements in terms of what will be short-term, long-term, so to manage that best practice.
Yes.
Second, just high-level question is, from a state level, when they make changes to homestead exemptions like we just had, what impact does that have on, if any, on managing long-term debt as it relates to property tax receipts?
I believe the most recent change in state law didn't impact municipalities.
Okay.
Just.
I was just curious, okay. But if they did.
They did lots of other things.
Oh, that was.
So, okay, so if they did, if they
Speak to
changed
that,
it,
I think we can, right?
Yeah.
If you talk about if you want to answer, go ahead, I don't think so. But there is an impact. And it's not necessarily directly to the long-term debt. It's generally to your M&O,
gotcha,
right? Which we over-leverage, thus
makes sense.
reducing our ability to deliver to you key services that you asked for. And so this debt that we're talking about utilizing CO bonds for, we placed in the operations budget, right? That budget, Christoph's presentation, gets more and more restricted seemingly every session.
Every session.
And this debt, by the way, to the point you made, Councilman, this debt and this debt strategy, this is kind of industry standard. It really is. We're not, I would love to say we're so smart that we're introducing something that's so incredibly new and cutting edge. It isn't. It's just, this is how local governments operate, balancing, issuance of geo debt for large, significant projects so that you ensure there is voter input and what you would consider kind of everyday debt, maintenance debt. Again, we are paying for this stuff already. You're not asking the voters to approve when you go out and buy this new fire engine. We're buying $11 million worth of fire equipment in the next 3 years. But right now, our plan is to fund it all from M&O. That means that's a reduction in our operating capital.
Less ability to hire additional
Police, fire,
staff,
parks, public works,
increase salaries.
anything that you think about with city government is reduced by $14 million total across 3 years. And so you're gonna pay for it. So that, I wanna hammer that point because I think being sensitive to the concern that I think you're making is that, we're issuing the debt without the citizens' input when it comes to what we're talking about. We know there are other cities who will do whatever. In fact, the city did that. You added new debt with the fire station because of the need to respond. That's not what we're proposing. We're proposing to take the things that are already contemplated in our budget, in the maintenance part, already going to be paid for, and simply issuing the debt for them so that we can free up operating capital.
And again, I don't want to belabor this, but every time we issue a GO, we're imposing an additional tax burden on citizens. We do the same thing with just using a CO in this terms.
So to Christoph's, to go back to that slide, our objective was to find a strategy. If you go back to your slide showing the INS rate, the one point I don't think we did a good job of illustrating, but it's there. That's your INS rate in 2 years, voter approved, 27 cents. This shows a constant. We contemplated a strategy that did not raise the INS rate. Now what happens is, if we don't look at a different way of funding operations, you're gonna be forced to make some tough choices.
Yeah.
So all we're simply doing is shifting what you've already obligated us to. You're gonna have to buy new fire equipment. And I go back to fire, I'm not picking on them, but the reality is we have to fund our fire service. And when you look at our 14 million.
Sitting right
They got the biggest, best toys. That's all it is. The ones with the best toys win. When you look at $14 million of what we call M&O or CapEx debt, it's being paid for right now, and it's going to impact the M&O rate, which means you either A, run into a situation where you cannot provide the level of operations and service that you want to. Because remember, you can only get a 3.5% revenue increase every year, and inflation is probably going to continue to exceed that. Right? You run into a situation where you can't get your services, or you contemplate a tax rate increase. And nobody wants to do that.
A voting tax.
That's right. So this scenario, simplistically stated, keeps the INS rate the same.
Yeah, our goal here is to manage to that target. The target is set by the council. So it's not about using this to force that up. Well, it's about managing it within that flexibility, because every year, again, things are gonna change. And rather than sort of waiting every 3 years to have a conversation with the community, we'll be able to have a conversation with the council every year, a couple times a year, about what that debt portfolio looks like and how we manage it to manage that target.
The other thing, and this is a point, it's not a major point, but to the point Christoph's making, that flexibility. So whenever we issue geo, or tell you your geo capacity, it's kind of an estimate, has to be, because it's based on certain assumptions. So in an interval of 3 years, there may be additional capacity that becomes available you don't capture. You're leaving on the table. And this will allow us to get additional capacity to fund more maintenance operation equipment, capital stuff, or more significant changes.
Let me try an example.
Yeah.
You know, and we're gonna stick with fire because then it's fun. There you go.
Don't drive so fast.
But
Chief Denning's over here.
No love. These toys are boring.
Yeah.
They're just
Right.
copies.
You have an ambulance and then you have an engine, you know, so this year we need to buy 2 ambulances, next year we need to buy an engine. And that engine now is approaching, was it $2 million to buy?
1.4.
1.45. Okay.
It's the other one that's 2.8. What's the other one?
We've already ordered that.
truck's
It's done.
There you go.
Yeah, the ladder truck is too.
Damage is done on that. We've already ordered.
So you've got to
Paid for.
you've got to manage those over time so that you know, this year we get ambulances, this year we got to sort of defer some expenses in order to fit that ladder truck into the model. And this gives us that flexibility to do that, basically. So we manage our debt portfolio. Do we have room for it this year? How do we make room for it? What vehicle has to be pushed off for a year in order to make some room for that? That's the conversation we're talking about having on a more intentional basis, so that you see it and that the community wants to see it as well. Right now, we're kind of managing that through a couple of different funds with leases, and it's our M&O. You're not seeing it in the right area, because it is dead.
Yeah, yeah, directionally, I mean, I like this. I mean, you know, for years I've kind of looked at city finance, and you're right, it's simplistic. I mean, as I was looking through this yesterday, it kind of came to mind. If you're an individual and you have $50,000 and you leave it in a savings account at 0.5%, or do you put it in something that's active? And it's sort of, you know, I do think there needs to be a more active approach. It makes a lot of sense. My 2 concerns, one is, and it's being addressed, Mike brought it up, is this city generally has always been very averse to COs. I mean, it's just, you know, the previous administration just didn't do them and took pride, I think, in that fact.
Well, there was a reason for that. It was past history, and there was an administration long ago that I think it was Shane under his, when he was mayor, there was an issuance of debt through COs on major stuff, and there was a lot of backlash.
So there's sort of a rebound.
And it kind of, but they didn't do it right. They didn't do it this way.
Yeah, I'd say we got smart guys here. So, you know, so the CO, that was terrible. So the CO part, I think we can discuss with the other part. Just, and this is just as an individual, and because I'm not an expert, but just so I understand, anytime you start doing stuff like that, you do increase the risk. I mean, it's inherent in actively managing money, right? So I just want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves, there's not risk situations that I'm not savvy with this, so I'm asking for your.
I think that's different than our portfolio management that Michael and our consultants do. We're talking about debt, and Christoph, you guys can talk to this more, but the risk you speak of would be like our portfolio management that Michael does, where they're making investments and
Yes.
otherwise.
Yes.
There's no risk associated here except maybe higher interest rates.
Okay.
To Christoph's point, you can always issue lower interest debt to pay off the higher interest debt.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
And if I oversimplify that.
Want to make sure I
Well,
understood that.
I think to your point, I think part of the issue is just the, handcuffing future generations to debt that we're spending today. I think that's the perception we want to avoid.
Yeah, well, I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah.
That's why you don't want to stretch your debt past the useful life of the assets that it's supporting.
No, that makes
Do you want to
sense.
speak
Okay, that makes sense.
how this isn't really necessarily hurting our capacity in the future?
It's not, I don't know if that was the issue, but no, it's not hurting our future capacity fully. It certainly is impacting it. We would be misrepresentative to say otherwise, but that's a strategy. So the point that Christoph made earlier, you got $100 million you've got to spend today. Don't spend it today. The need doesn't go away. What happens over time? So we're just trying to create additional capacity to address today's needs by going basically and taking future capacity and bringing it forward.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily kill us.
No.
In 27?
2027, we'll have, I don't know if you show that in your slide.
Yeah.
In 2027, we've made a very conservative estimate that, so right now, and again, this is a semi-conservative estimate as well with the $80 million of capacity. We're talking to Michael with just some really conservative estimates of 5% annual growth, still 20-year amortization. Again, we know we would want to shift that. You're looking at about a $40 million capacity. You get more than 5% annual growth, and if we're allowed to shift some of the amortization schedules to 30 years to match some of useful life of the projects, then you've increased capacity.
To about 80 million.
Well, potentially. If you get double-digit growth as we have every year, you're going to be close to 80 million. Right? I won't toss a firm number out, but I want to talk about the assumptions that's made on it. Comfortably, you're at 40 million with those very conservative assumptions. The odds are pretty good we're going to grow at a rate greater than 5% every year.
Actually, we're estimating 2%.
When we changed it. Did you go back?
So our I don't want to muddy the water too much, but what David's referring to is when we issue our debt capacity is created when both our interest rate assumptions don't align with what actually happens, payment of existing debt happens, and then property values increase. In the slides presented here, the debt capacity line assumes that property values grow at a rate of 2% in the long run. And so David is saying if we see a more in line with historical averages of 5% or greater, then we'll have debt capacity created as a result of property values increasing and in the next 3 years.
So to the point, Michael had an offline conversation where I posed to him, what's our 27 capacity if X factors? The factor being 5% growth versus 2, which is here. So we'd have additional capacity than for someone who's watching in TV land, that may show X. We would have additional capacity based on these factors. 5% growth, and Christoph's point is his chart shows 2% because they were. But I asked for a 2027 capacity scenario. That scenario included the 5% growth factor and 20-year amortization, and that would yield approximately 40 million in capacity. Again, I think it's safe to say we hope to grow more than 5%, but there you are. So take those factors as they are. To the mayor's point, I hope is that anyone who thinks that by enacting these strategies today of kind of seizing future capacity, that somehow we're killing our future abilities, that's not the case at all.
Christoph, can we go back to the INS rate slide?
This one?
Yes. So if I understand this correctly, our current INS rate for 2024 is what? Just
over 18.
18, yeah.
We're at 17.
Okay, so we're talking about increasing to 27%.
27 cents. That's
Right.
voter
Yeah,
approved.
27.
That's voter approved.
That's voter approved.
23.
That's not anything we're doing, that's already voter approved.
That was
And then we're holding it constant. That's the whole thing I want to keep drumming over and over again. We started this conversation, and the one directive that I was clear on when they began their modeling is the INS rate has to remain constant.
Yeah, because I don't think that a lot of the people out there watching are going to understand that. They're going to see that big
Understood.
curve going up.
Well, we said it, we'll say it again. That increase is the already approved voter increase. Everything thereafter remains constant from that point.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's gonna happen.
That's already happened.
That's already happened.
It's already happened.
Yeah.
So starting in 2026, looking at the bar chart now, not the INS rate, the growth that we see there in terms of capacity is strictly because of the 2% increase that's built into the model over time. So if it's higher, that could be more. If for some reason it's lower, it could be less, but.
Correct.
Okay.
And the assumptions regarding interest rate and debt that we're working over. And this includes the most aggressive movement from INS 10 years ago. So if we do less than that, it's going to create additional capacity as well.
Let's say it simply. Right now, what we're modeling, because there's a lot of information, so I want to just distill it down. What we're modeling in 2024, right, because you're going to contemplate a bond issuance, is 80 million in total capacity. We recognize that CIPTF is going to present to you approximately $63 million in recommendations. Christoph's point is we did an analysis of what we call CapEx, moving what you're going to pay already, whether you go with this concept or not, an M&O capital obligations of $14 million in that 3-year span. we're not proposing to move all of that 14 million. We recognize that if we do, it only leaves you with an additional capacity of $3 million across the 3 years. At best, we would propose moving $7 million of capacity from the
700.
7 million,
7 million, yes.
which would equate to about a $700,000 positive impact back to the M&O fund
For 24.
for the 24 bond issuance, and for
the 24 budget.
the 24 budget, 25 budget,
More than
we're
that.
at 25. Well, 24 if we get it done in time.
Which would leave $10 million in available capacity.
It would leave $10 million in additional GO, really debt capacity.
Debt.
How you want to issue it is the conversation.
Can I ask another rookie question?
Sure.
I don't know how many of these I get on rookie questions, but.
Just one.
So if we have a guaranteed INS rate of 27 cents with $80 million of bond capacity, assuming that's what we do.
Yeah.
But let's just say we only issue $10 million of bonds. We've got 70 million of capacity. Does that mean our INS is still gonna go up to 27 cents or does it stay lower?
Well, that increase is based on the debt that's already been authorized.
So so what happens with the extra, okay, so we don't have the bond, we haven't filled in the bucket of money to be spent, but we're collecting so does that mean we're just able to pay off our other debt faster?
No, this is an important definitional piece. What happens is that we wrap up all of our debt toward the end of the fiscal year, and we share that with Dallas County assessor.
Yeah, Dallas County.
Can I answer this? The short answer is yes, your tax rate goes down. The INS rate is basically equivalent to the amount of debt you issue. So if you don't issue $80 million in debt, the tax rate goes down.
Yeah.
Let me give you the simple answer. He's gonna give you a really smart guy answer. I'm gonna give you a really simple answer.
So it still boils down to math, spend money, you pay more, you spend
Well,
less,
yes,
you pay
because,
less.
well, and that's the policy discussion.
Yeah.
Because your need far exceeds anything we're contemplating in terms of debt.
Understood, I just want to
But
make
to
sure I
your
understand the
point,
mechanics.
Yep, the mechanics work just that way.
Okay.
Yeah, the mechanics, estimate, INS rate is based on the debt that has been issued.
Okay.
So if you issue less debt, it goes down.
Right.
You don't have the ability to set it higher than what you need to pay the actual debt that's incurred, and that debt's actually defined.
And it goes down naturally as you pay debt, right? But most cities, because you have a need for maintenance and improvements that's never going to go away, you create these issuance schedules.
So it allows us, in order to keep that at target, sometimes you gotta issue 2-year debt to keep it at target. Otherwise, they'll do this. And what that happens is it creates frustration on voters because they see the tax rate go up and down.
Okay, that makes sense,
You know,
alright, that makes
So
sense.
it's trying to keep it steady is,
Got it.
I think, a consistent goal of most of my
Makes sense.
So let's talk a little bit about, again, this sort of illustrates what we just went over. There's 80 million in capacity, 63 million has been talked about. There's 14 million of CapEx, which leaves 3 million over. But there are alternatives, which we just kind of ran for what you listed. That's me.
It seemed like the right time of it.
So just quickly, I'm kind of, taking a little bit of the thunder from the next presentation, but we got a $63 million of CIPTF proposal. The vast majority of that is streets and highways. 77% of it is, and right now it authorizes general obligation debt, if that were to be voted, to be used for maintenance. Maintenance is certainly something that you can use, it's of obligation to pay for, should you choose to do so. 44% of that, again, that's the total amount, not just of the 77, but 44% of this is just things that doesn't increase the carrying capacity of your transportation network. It's just simply fixing roads that have degraded. This is a model that just talks about maintenance structures and how to efficiently manage your transportation asset. It's based off mostly of asphalt. I know there's a lot of concrete here, and the numbers are a little off. But the story here is that if you intervene early in a road's life, before it degrades past a certain point, you can extend the life of the road at a much lower cost than putting that maintenance off and spending that dollar later. And you have order of magnitudes here, $7 per square yard if you intervene early, not quite 10 times that amount, certainly more than that if you wait until it degrades to the point that you have to completely reconstruct that road. I think the other piece that is important to understand is that not only is that a bad financial decision, it also impacts your quality of life. you have to live with that road being degraded far beyond that level. The goal here is that you want to be on that blue line on the chart upper right. You want to keep on intervening so that road life is extended at a lower cost, and you keep the experience and the safety of that road higher. In order to do that, you've got to get in front of the curve, so to speak. So that's kind of the whole point of this discussion, and that's where you have an opportunity to, rather than kind of going for the GO, you have an opportunity to use some of this CO flexibility to perhaps get that maintenance obligation happening on a more consistent basis. You use a shorter term debt rather than a 20 to 30 year GO debt to do maintenance. You use a shorter debt because the lifespan of that maintenance activity is less than a full road reconstruction. And you use that because, the other challenge here is that there is a restriction in state law that says if you take something from the voters and they vote it down, you can't do it. So you're taking a maintenance obligation, something that really should be done on a regular basis. It's 3 years. There actually was a bill that passed both the House and the Senate to extend that 3 years to 5 years this year. It did pass, the governor vetoed it.
Yeah.
He didn't do it because it was being our friend.
Okay.
He did it because he's holding hostage for his other interests.
So can I break into just a quick, but I understand financially, how this works and what you're gonna deal. Operationally though, are we operationally functional to be able to come in at a 75% maintenance position and start doing that? Because it seemed like historically, we just drive the wheels off something and then, go down to AutoZone or hope we get it running again.
I think we are, not maybe today, but we will be. That's why you've seen the changes you've seen. The reality is, I can't tell you why we haven't taken this strategic approach. I don't know why. So I don't have an answer for why we haven't, but this is exactly why we're introducing this to you, because it's much more difficult, not just financially, but even operationally, to try to repair and intervene in some of these roads, the more degraded they are. So are we in a position? I think we're getting better every single day, and I think you see that. The mayor sent us a complaint about a pothole that was on Miller Road yesterday, and within 2 hours, at best, it was repaired. So I think credit needs to be given to the improvements that are happening within the operations.
One other piece is that in order to get better in that area, it's not just about capital funding and resources you need, but you also need personnel and equipment. That personnel and equipment's gonna come out of what? Your M&O. So again, we need to, if we want to make that investment, we need to create an opportunity for the council to make that investment by creating room in the M&O. And that's part of how this strategy sort of works together. You allow your more flexibility on your capital side to make those long-term investments. You free up some room in your M&O to make that personnel, equipment sort of investments that you need to actually spend that money eventually. So, summary analysis. What we're really talking about here is trying to do more tax planning to really sort of maintain that INS rate at a consistent basis, manage a debt portfolio using both short and long-term debt, and have an action annually to allocate that debt capacity. So that we come to you on an annual basis and sort of say, okay, these are the expenses we've incurred this year that we want to support for debt. This is how it fits into your portfolio, or that out in the future. What that provides you, by making this change, is some flexibility in that M&O to make some decisions about how you want to allocate that and as we move forward. That depends on growth and other priorities of the council. And to get those capital expenses out of that operation. Next steps, of course, we've got a lot of work to do to give you more detail and have get your feedback on this as we move forward. But the EMS example is one that's probably a little more urgent. We had planned to move forward with that fashion that we have now. Moving those kinds of things out of a lease and more to a direct purchase. So from an operational perspective, let me use that as an example. In the past, where we had $250,000 in the budget that's there to pay the lease payment, we've negotiated the lease, council's authorized the lease, and that moves forward for 7 years. The way this would look different from an operational perspective is that you would certainly, if we're going to buy something that's a $1.7 million, that's the cost of setting up with council, you're going to have to approve that. We would pay for that out of our cash. And then we would bundle that with other expenses throughout the year and bring that debt to support that expenditure to you later in the year when we have other expenditures that we can support that kind of illustrate the process. So you see it absolutely at the purchase point, and then you see it toward the end of the year where we issue basically a package of debt that cover those purchases that have been authorized previously.
Would that package be a mixture or a diversified mix of different instruments? Or would it be all one type with a set term?
It'd probably mostly be COs.
Okay, so COs and with a set term of the number of years that correspond to the items that are contained?
Correct. So for example, if you have combined most equipment, it's gonna be 7 years. Set 5
Not if it's fire equipment. If it's a fire engine, it's not even 7 years. Just, I don't want to hold to,
Right,
I
no,
don't give a number that we hold to.
Right, but I think he was talking more about the medics,
Yeah,
which
we're
I
talking
understand. It's, I just want to make sure that we don't mix a fire truck and the medic stuff, a 7 and a 20, and just say, well, let's just do it at 20 because that no longer is fiscally responsible.
Yeah, understood.
Well, I mean, like panel replacements, certain alley replacements you could do at a 10-year.
That's what Mike was listening to here. When we talk about tailored debt, that's exactly what we're talking about. Is you need a mixture of different issuances that, some of them shorter term that we pay off faster, some of them are longer term. Again, changing into the useful life of
Okay, so I'm going to ask maybe a stupid question. It's not a rookie question, it's just a stupid question.
Same thing.
Yeah. So politically, things change over time. What if the current council approves the purchase of things through cash and there's a change of scenery and the next council decides that we're not in favor of issuing COs or issuing debt instruments of that?
And it impacts your ending fund balance.
Okay, so that then we're impacting the M&O, the annual budget.
Yeah.
You're spending this money anyway. The things that I'm gonna keep hammering this point, not just for the council, but for the people watching. Talk about the educational part of this. When we're talking about CO issuances, moving CapEx, M&O, debt obligations, you're gonna spend that money anyway. How you spend it becomes the question. So I wouldn't want anyone, and not that that's your point, but I wanna keep reiterating this, there's gonna be an impact to the M&O. It's just a matter of degrees. How exponentially bad do you want to impact this fund? You can provide some relief to this M&O fund right now, general fund, right now.
But to the point,
But if you change,
if the lease cost this year is $250,000, we decide to purchase and something changes, then
Here we
we've
are.
got $1.5 million worth of expense
That's it.
on this year's budget that you
Right.
weren't anticipating.
yes, sir. That's why we're having this discussion now, to begin to kind of take your temperature, obviously in contemplation with your consideration of geo issuance. I said to you back in June, July, we have to look at different ways of doing business, ways that other cities are doing their business, ways that will, make room for us to operate more effectively. That didn't include adding new debt. That isn't what this is. It's just a different way of funding your operations.
And more to your point on that we have some challenges in our budget, especially going in future years. If y'all remember very clearly that we were looking at future deficits based on future obligations coming due and not having the resources in our M&O budget to sustain those. This is part of the creative solution to bridge that gap, not be looking at a future deficit and being able to meet those obligations by virtue of moving things that we tied up in our M&O budget. We're just tied up on those. It's taking our ability to fund salaries, personnel, things of that nature. By doing this, we have freed up, significant M&O capacity, especially in future years, that we won't have that deficit anymore. We won't be looking at that scary reality that we otherwise would be staring at if we didn't follow this advice. We would still have to come up with, millions of dollars to bridge the deficit gap.
Part of that spend, that 87% spend down, were things of this CapEx nature that we're talking about.
Yeah, a part of my value of working for you guys is that, going back to your point, we want to bring you options that give you flexibility. Don't tie your hands to a choice that you have to make. This is a strategy that does that, gives you more tools, more opportunities. If you change your mind and say that, that target's no longer a target, it's something else, there's the flexibility to move to that new target when we have a portfolio that has more diversity in it. We can move to that target. Now, is there an impact on what you can do because you have less money? Absolutely. But that's the policy body's decision. and it's our job to be able to implement it. We can do that more effectively if we're working in this kind of a scenario, again, one that's just geodet, it's kind of locked in for a strong period of time.
Well, on the finance committee, I know Wendy will probably attest to this, we have had a lot of conversations about the way that we amortize some of these capital expenses that come out of our general fund, and frankly, it was confusing, because even from a household finance perspective, I think that you buy a vehicle, at that point, you should either start saving for your next vehicle, longer term, or you finance that vehicle and you're paying it off, right? You get to that point where there's some sort of replacement plan. And it seemed like, as a city, we didn't really have that in place. It was just kind of like, what does this year have in store for us?
Right.
Without a long-term plan of how do we get to the next fire truck that we have to buy, or the next ambulance that we have to buy. And it was incredibly frustrating because, I mean, when Councilmember Gallardi was on the finance committee, he was confused about those situations. So I appreciate this different look at it. I definitely want to give it some more thought and give it some more in-depth look as far as what other cities are doing in terms of business practices and those types of things. But I love the outside the box thinking because it's not the way we've always done things. And it's not the way we've always done things. I hate that excuse.
But we've always done it that way.
Hey, exactly.
And to your point, Councilman, we're certainly not asking for any decisions today. This is really just an introductory conversation to these concepts. We'll come back to you, get additional feedback on the 5th to see if there are things that we need to begin to, how we shape any potential issuances going forward past the 5th into what I will ask for will be special call meetings, and I'll send you an email on that.
And my last word on CEOs, I won't say anymore. I appreciate this. I think it's a very unique way of looking at it. I think it has a lot of merit. If this council decides to go this route, accept this proposal, let's go on record right now. So we need to probably have several town hall meetings to just do that education process, because they're going to hear CEOs, they're going to think of one thing and not think about this. So education is going to be critical. I know we said that a couple of times, maybe a couple of series of town halls.
I'll be looking at some dates and
Okay.
I'll work with the
Just to-
secretary.
You know, Christoph would be a great person to throw in front of him.
Do my best.
Seriously, check on it. No, but it can be explained well. Y'all explained it well. There's a lot of merit. We just need to be citizens of it.
Point taken, I would only add one thing. It may be unique to Rowlett, but it's not unique to municipal government.
Especially in Texas.
No, but, so I know it's unique here, but I want to again contextualize everything, is that it's not unique to the world.
Yeah, and honestly, I was looking at.
But
doing
what
a town
point taken
hall.
about the education?
I was looking at doing a general town hall in the future anyway, but we can certainly wrap this into that and make sure that we cover the change that we're doing to kind of really the way that we finance in the city.
Like Mike said, Christoph did a really great job of explaining this, because I came into this wary of this whole thing, but especially when you pointed out that what we're doing now is leasing all this big equipment. And I think people can relate to that, people who've leased cars versus buying cars and that kind of thing. That was kind of the turning point for me. So, yeah, I think that you could do a good job with the public.
I think the piece that
No pressure.
I think the piece that would be really critical is to give 3 or 4 of the examples that you gave for different pieces of equipment throughout the city and explain what the difference would be and how that would work. Because people are going to try to relate that to their own lives and things that they have experience with. And at a high level, a lot of this is very complex and very detailed. But when you start to take an individual example and say, this is how it works, if you do that for 5 or 6 different things, I think you'll get a lot of people more understanding their concept.
I don't get too far in the weeds, but this question is, what are the assumptions that were made with Sapphire Bay as far as, the next 4 or 5 years, what sort of tax? You know, are we just basically leaving it flat?
So that's why I asked the question about growth, and that's why I'm happy to hear the 2%, because I don't want to be in the same boat that we were in last year when we were talking about financial shortfall because of delayed revenues and those types of things. 2% I think is extremely conservative, maybe overly conservative.
Yeah, I
I
was
think
gonna say.
I think it makes a lot of sense.
We've been consistently double-digit increasing, and so 2% is like.
But I think that's the right
be
approach.
Sapphire Bay is not a significant driver in our model. Oh, there is.
Yeah, that's fine. I just
We know
wanna
what's gonna
make- I just
happen,
wanna make sure
we're
I
just
didn't-
trying to be realistic about when that
Yeah.
is.
Wasn't trying to answer for you,
No,
just
no, no.
2%.
Great point, and not over leverage expenditures related there.
So,
It seems like there's some clarifying.
yeah, just to clarify, we did assume 8% growth for 25,
Uh-huh.
and then 2% thereafter. So we did expect that, we do have some growth that's coming on, we didn't include that in the model. But, again, moving forward, we're always conservative in our estimates, we're always gonna try to underestimate, rather than overestimate. That keeps us out of trouble.
And part of that 8%, not only is it growth within the city, but as our home values have rapidly increased, right? There's a cap on how much can actually be recognized every year. So those home values have to catch up with whatever that number is overall.
All right, any other questions? I appreciate that, was very informative.
Thank you very much.
And now, the people who have been so long waiting, and we appreciate all waiting this long, but at least you've learned some stuff. Now we ask you all to come up, and it's item 2C, presentation by the Community Investment Program Task Force. Jeff Sheldon and Richard Carney. Yeah, you know what, that's a good idea, let's take a
Take a
5-minute
break. Okay.
Yep, so we just sat down, but we're
Jeff Sheldon in, everybody.
let's recess at 1:26, and we'll be back at, in 1:30. All right, so it is 1:36, we went a little past 1:31 there. And we are going to reconvene, we are on a presentation by the Community Investment Program Task Force. All right.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, staff. Today, the Community Investment Program Task Force, simply referred to later as Task Force, will present our 24 bond program recommendations. First, let me introduce the members who are here today. Richard Call, Richard Ford, and John Conte. Our chairman, Eric Ernst, is not able to be here, and a number of other members are not able to be here either. The task force was formed in March of '23, organized in April, and we began to hear department presentations in April through June. Now, importantly, in June, the task force took a day to tour parts of the city that were recommended by city departments for our attention. The tour quickly established a general understanding of city problems that the bonding would address. It's very important because it affected our decision for a general allocation of funding, as you will see next. Our initial understanding of the bonding capacity would be approximately $60 million. $63 million is the most recent figure that we worked with. The task force decided a goal to divide the funding as follows: 1/3 for parks and recreation and public safety projects. The task force also decided 2/3 of the funding would go to streets and alleys and related capital projects. You will see this in greater detail later. Our process, let's take a look at how we would be deciding on prioritization. Our process and strategy for Parks and Rec and public safety would be the ranking criteria that we have here. These 10 criteria ranging from transportation to special considerations. Each of the 10 criteria is ranked by each member of the task force, so that that's in the footnote, which is fairly readable there. Each criteria is ranked on a scale of 1 to 10, actually it's 0 to 10. And each of the criteria is intended to capture the value of that particular project. Now, the way to do this is to take transportation, for example. If the project had an effect on transportation in the city, it could be easily ranked from 0 to 10. And if it was, for example, Kids Kingdom, and Parks and Recreation, transportation would be practically a 0 or a 1. However, if you took it quality of life, it could be a 9 or a 10, depending upon your inclination and feelings about the value of Kids Kingdom to the community.
So each project was ranked in each of these categories with a number.
Correct. Parks and Rec and also public safety. That was not the case with regard to streets and alleys or
We'll get
related
to that.
projects, which I'll explain later. Now, with regard to streets and alleys and related projects, this includes specific projects with the largest being streets and alleys. You can see here where there are possibility of 40 streets and 60 alleys that would be considered. The total value of that would be more than $100 million, which is not available to us. So the streets and alleys are going to have to be evaluated so that we come to some idea of what the funding is going to be. If you look at the last bullet there, the PCI data is subjective and may be outdated. I'm going to cover the basis. Okay? The PCI data dates from 2018, basically, and it's considered too old to really be reliable.
So there's some questions.
Yes.
So we had funded a PCI program, I should say. I can't remember the company's name. It's lost on me. Unfortunately, not anybody here, staff at the time, did not give proper instructions to evaluate those streets in a correct scientific way. They did it in, I'm trying to remember because this was quite a while ago, back when we did our tour.
You want me to help you with this?
Sure, go ahead.
We instructed the company, unfortunately, to kind of go out and do a maintenance index as compared to looking for one that would look to road rehabilitation. So they really didn't look for what we thought we were asking them to look for. That's the short answer.
But the answer is, our data is year 2018.
Well, that data is newer, but that data is bad data. It's not good data. And
It is. But staff went back after, all of that debacle and kind of compiled our own internal CPI to try to give something to the committee to utilize. And so it took into account repairs that had been made since the last successful analysis, kind of internal, historical, institutional knowledge and other things. So while this PCI isn't the one derived directly from the consultant, it did include some updates and some integration of information since the last successful PCI.
But it didn't do what it was intended to do.
Not with consultants, no.
And so,
How much did that come? 100 and some thousand.
but those individuals are no longer here, who were responsible for overseeing that. It was a fail. I would just say it's a fail. So that was the unfortunate situation that our CIPTF was put in, was they didn't have good data to work on to evaluate our streets. Hence that they did not rank the streets, because they're not going to traverse every single street in the city. That would take a long time. But we'll get more into that on how they're coming to their number. So, sorry, I wanted to clarify. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Yeah, the last bullet point here with PCI data is the outside consultant that provided information with regard to the maintenance of the streets and alleys proved to be essentially invalid for our use of trying to rank streets and alleys. However, given that, we will detail later how the ranking took place. So let's look at the total number of projects with regard to streets and alleys. It can be grouped here with replacements quite differently. One is traffic signals, the other is concrete panel replacements, the other is design for particular projects, Cheese Road, for example, Shrady Road design and construction, and then other items like sidewalk connectivity and the screen walls. The greater part of funding would be used for streets and alleys. And in the brand there, you see where staff selects streets or alleys to either be replaced or maintained or reconditioned based upon the information that they will have.
And to follow up on that, of course, these projects will require, every project where a contract is required will require council authorization. So we will be able to make sure that that the street being proposed for reconstruction is actually a deserving street to be reconstructed.
There are some streets we saw on the tour as individuals where only part of the street could be repaired or reconditioned and replacement. However, occasionally you would come across something that was really a disaster, where the street was buckled, sidewalks, because of subsidence in the street, could be caved, curbing would be gone, or broken certainly. This is where something that requires a fuller reconstruction. However, as we'll cover in greater detail later, let's look at the total number of projects that were evaluated. Parks and Rec. In the first column here was projects evaluated. There were a total of 14, which equated a total of $36 million. Those selected were 8 and rounded to $9 million, 979. Public facilities. I won't read through all of this, but you get the general idea. We had 132 projects to look at, cost $170 million, and we finally whittled it down to where $63 million budget. This is a graphic intended to reflect the recommended funding distribution with listing of the projects for each category. Each category, reading from left to right, Parks and Rec, public safety, streets and alleys, and related projects. And those are itemized below each category.
So I know you started out with an intent to have 1/3 be for parks and public safety and 2/3 be for streets, alleys, and related projects. Is there?
This is, the reason for this was the result of the tour, where we saw very clearly the need for either upgrading or reconstruction with regard to particular projects, whether it was Parks and Rec or whether it was streets and alleys. And at that time, we had received from the departments a number of the projects sufficient in order to be us to gauge whether or not this kind of balance should be used. And it was the decision of the task force at that time to prioritize funding to streets and alleys and related projects as opposed to parks and recreation and the public safety, which could be easily covered with the amount that was scheduled for them.
Thank you.
This is the way that, given the previous graphic, this is the way that it actually breaks down. simply another way to view the recommended project categories with their number and the recommended funding.
So Jeff, is there a particular reason why some traffic signal lights were grouped under the streets and alleys and others instead of public safety?
Simply because it fits under the larger category of transportation and traffic through the city.
Plus, it wouldn't be a project managed by or under the department of any police or fire. It would be seen by engineering and public works.
Now, we're going to take a closer look at each breakdown here, Parks and Rec and Public Safety, streets and alleys. First, Richard Cole, my co-member here, will break down the Parks and Rec.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to be here and speak to the council. First of all, I want to take a moment and thank the staff who supported the task force so ably during an unprecedented time of staff turnover during our deliberations. We appreciate all of the staff members who assisted our task force. Did a great job. So as pointed out, the Parks Department originally proposed 14 projects for $36+ million, and we reduced that to what you see up there. I'm not going to soldier intelligence and read through all of that for you. You can see there are 8 projects, total of $9.79 million. They are, I think it's accurate for me to say that those are more or less the priority that were given to the task force by staff. I will say with that list up that the community parks and maintenance facility improvements portion was identified as the top priority of the former director of the Parks Department. So I would like you to keep that in mind as you look at that list. So taking that in order, and again, not necessarily trying to imply in any way that that's a priority list, 1 through 8, but rather an overall list that could just be bullet pointed. The first one, obviously, wet zone. The idea here was to improve the ability for our wet zone to create revenue for additional pavilions, shading, and other activity improvements for $1.5 million. The second part of the wet zone water park was electrical compliance in the pump room, electrical rooms, and other concession stands that are required to upgrade our facilities there. The next one is Kids Kingdom, and there basically we're interested in replacing the pour-in-place surfacing material that's deteriorated beyond reasonable use.
Before you move on to that,
yes, sir.
Wanted to inquire about this. I understand that the installation originally was not done properly. There was no sealant after it was initially installed, which resulted in the more or less rapid degradation of pour-in-place surface. My question though is, have we determined if pour-in-place surface is actually the best resource to use for Kids Kingdom, or is there another product that is more suited for Kids Kingdom, for example, turf? Just wanted to.
We would want to look at the best application of that.
Yeah, and there's actually a national playground association mandate on what are the appropriate things. So, I mean, it's a good resource that can be used to guide us in that direction.
I think the better thing would be to say resurfacing.
Yeah.
I think staff hasn't had the ability to look at it yet. What's going to be the surface?
Okay. So this isn't saying that we're going to go back and use the same material, but rather this is to provide us with the tools to investigate what is the best material. If it happens to be pour-in-place still, or if it happens to be another material. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Next one is community park maintenance facility. And I mentioned that a moment ago that our previous director, Parks Director, felt this was a top priority for a warehouse for equipment that is now out in the weather and needs to be inside somewhere to prevent additional deterioration. Plus an opportunity for the staff to have offices, restrooms, as you can see, shadows and meeting space.
Is that gonna be, as park staff recommending that that goes in essentially the same place that it currently is, or not geographically moving it to some other part of it?
It'll remain in the same place.
Okay.
And I don't, were you on the tour when we looked at the current conditions?
I've been there recently.
Basically, what staff's working out of right now are is one Connex, and I'm about to say containers, no, just one Connex container and one disturbing bathroom.
Yeah.
You put it kindly. Version.
So this is going to remain separate and not become part of the whole facility at Kirkwood Park, the campus facility.
No, ma'am, this is their workspace. Think of it as a service center. That's what that is.
A lot of equipment, motors.
No, I understand. It's a clarifying question.
There is no intent at this time.
All right, next we have erosion control, which the task force allowed maybe an urgent need in the community. We have identified several, as you can see, places for specific erosion control projects. I think it'd be appropriate at this point to point out that the cost figures that you see on all of these were provided by staff. I don't think it's fair to say that the task force participated in the development of those cost figures. So I thought it would be important to make that clear. Okay, so.
Would the intent there be to construct erosion walls, or what would be the scope of that correction?
I think that's. John?
Mr. Cote had his hand up.
Yeah, the scope was, the original ask was 1 million for each of those 3 areas. And the task force decided that it would probably be best to go ahead and fund 1.75 million, primarily for a study of those 3 areas to determine what it is that we need to do, and then the rest of the money to start doing that.
Here's Dallas Council.
I don't know that that was
Right.
the case. I thought 1.7 was going to directly address those particular areas. There was an initial ask of 3 million, and that difference was to fund a citywide study of erosion control. But this is to pay for the actual.
The original ask was 3 million, 1 million for each one of those 3 areas. And that's what brought up the initial comments about how's 1 million derived? Did we have any study? Do we know what we're using? All those answers were basically no.
Oh, okay.
So that's when.
Thank you, I remember that because I remember the notes.
So the focus is on a study then, not on actual on-the-ground correction?
Hopefully the idea is we'll probably put 750,000 towards a study and then have 1 million to start correcting whatever the study tells us to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may, I'll add one more to that, and I'll simply cite what the staff provided us. And that is, in addition to the information you see there, those specific areas for erosion control, examples of erosion control they provided us were seawalls, gabion baskets. All lake Hubbard erosion control methods need to be approved by the city of Dallas. So I want to make sure we made that footnote. Okay. We can go back and answer the question. Then next up is Rowlett Community Center gymnasium hardwood floor. We've been advised that the hardwood floor has been deteriorated and redone and deteriorated and redone to the point now where it can't be redone anymore. And the staff is recommending through the task force that the hardwood flooring be replaced for $170,000 and some additional volleyball interior painting and some improvement in the bleacher stands be included in that overall $0.40 million. Parking lot improvements, you can see a few of the items up on the overhead, where parking lots are deteriorated, potholes, even gravel. And so in those items, those particular spots, parking lot improvements were recommended with those amounts provided by staff.
So those are basically maintenance type items, not enlarging, for example, Springfield Park, not enlarging that parking lot, it's just fixing things to that.
Additional.
Yes,
Take care of this back there.
Well,
It's a combination,
It is,
because like Springfield Park with Exon Road is a total addition.
okay, so there is gonna be new construction as well as, okay.
I remember, in addition to these that are listed up there, that there was going to be an expansion of the parking around the community center, Kids Kingdom, and down to the red zone.
That would be the Congrove Park. Yeah.
Okay. Next to last, kayak dock and launches. An effort to enhance our reputation as a city on the lake, improve our lake access for our community at those locations. The kayak launch, approximately $75,000 each, and shoreline improvements, $275,000 at those locations.
So I'm clear, you're asking for 3 kayak launches at these parks?
Yes.
The park at the end of Main Street, it's kind of been under advisement, is that already funded, or is that, okay, that's separate funding for that?
But there are no improvements except for the soccer field that is there with the sun.
Yeah.
Yes.
But on that project,
Oh, kayak, I'm talking about kayak.
But kayak launches is
already
included.
funded.
Yes.
Okay, that's-
but when Jeff spoke to that project earlier, didn't he say that there was some sort of hang up with it?
Yeah, I forgot to ask that question. There was some reason, a delay, can you speak to that? What the delay was?
There was a bid and it came in over budget. We are now looking at tailoring back the scope of work, which will include this kayak launch, I believe, and some parking and lot improvements. And we need to work with the design engineer to adjust those contract documents so it can be rebid.
Is what we're giving up somewhat substantial? I mean, how much are we talking that we're having to give up? Or to set
That's taxing my memory a bit. I remember there was quite a long list of bid items in the bid, and it came in at nearly twice, not twice, maybe, 2/3 over.
No, it was more than double over. It
Over the
was
budget.
680,000 compared to 330,000 that was in the account.
Okay.
just like they got it here? So if that particular set of improvements is 680,000, how is 500,000 going to fund 3 parks?
Well, but there was a lot, there were,
Shelters and there were other amenities that were included
Yeah.
in that original
Trail,
scope.
the trail goes around it.
the scope is
Shade shelters.
trimmed way back.
Yeah.
Most of that's concrete. I can't remember or not, did we fill that gap in this proposal for parks? The difference, I can't remember if that was a,
For Lakefront and Pecan Grove? No, that's not on.
Okay,
In this.
well,
It got cut off.
that could be encouraged.
And you define shoreline improvements, that's not erosion control, I'm saying.
That could be for erosion control if needed, and then just the earthwork to get the launch off there.
Oh, okay.
And the last one in my presentation, my portion of the presentation is Sherwood Park improvements. It's clearly up there, parking lot improvements, updating playground equipment that's deteriorated or broken, and then an irrigation design and installation project for that particular park. If you'd like, I'll stop here for questions of me, or we can continue through the whole presentation and then come back for questions if you prefer to do it that way.
For the playground update on this one in particular, 20 to 50,000 doesn't go very far when it comes to playground equipment. Are we thinking of rehabbing the whole thing, or what's the scope of work for that?
Here,
And you may not have that answer, I apologize.
Yeah, it would just be increasing the footprint of it and adding additional play structures. So perhaps putting a younger age play structure, so like a 2 to 5 rather than the 5 to 12 that we've got out there.
Got it, okay, thank you.
Wasn't there a parks and or a trails component in this originally, or is that not?
this already has a trail.
It was one of those that was given the criteria, evaluation, and the ranking. It's the very next one, if funds were available. Trail component.
Well, I'll wait to the end.
Yeah, 14 altogether. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, to use the fire department's name in vain here enough. I'm gonna make this short and sweet, I hope. Our first slide here is regarding our fire stations. It reflects 7% of the anticipated funds. You'll notice there in the right-hand column, various amounts, and that is just reflective of the level of disrepair of the buildings. This slide, please take note. Replace, add, repair, repair, repair. Again, it's reflective of the neglect of the buildings. There's an item down there, computer and security cameras. It's at risk. Buildings need to be updated. If you would have seen the picture that the chief provided for us, you would just be appalled. And I look back at my notes and I made a note to myself as I felt like a slumlord looking at some of those pictures. Don't need to be treating our first responders. They don't need to be living and working in this environment.
You know, it's a little troubling. We need to repair the fire sprinklers in a firehouse, but I guess of all the places to have,
Well,
Well, you know,
they have the fire engine. They
yeah,
just
they're
pull
already
it
there.
right
It's not a day and never work on their own car.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, but he doesn't have the stuff to flush then.
Well, I think there's literally missing urinals and. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. It's pretty bad. Anyways.
No, sorry, I don't mean to make light of it, just.
Thank you for your time.
Oh, wow. It's pretty easy though.
That's a long way, good.
Good job.
Council, let's look at the streets and alleys doing late projects. See there a list of several projects, total 48.5 million. Good. Next slide. Cyclical cabinets, replacements. We're talking about enhancing our signal cabinet technology to include traffic flow
information that will be sent to the police department, where they can compare that to their camera views to see problem spots, react more rapidly to needs. The cabinets actually react to real-time traffic load as well, so they'll respond accordingly and allow traffic to move through the community in a much more efficient manner, as well as the cabinets are self-diagnostic, so they break totally that they're broken. And a lot of things have done via central station at PwC signal shop, instead of having to go out to the cabinets, they will have a little bit speedier ability to repair them when they break.
So this takes care of all work.
This takes care of this 24.
How many total do we have?
Well, I was gonna wait till after your presentation to talk about single cabinets. I should share on that.
Can I ask one question real quick, just a clarifying question? When you say location, does that mean all directions, not just a single light, correct? Okay.
The entire intersection.
Okay.
One cabinet generally handles the entire.
And so, okay, so that was for the
These
ones
are
on
cabinets.
on George Bush, on PGBT, on both sides of PGBT, that would be that single location? Okay, cool. Thank you.
And you can see how complex it is in the little circles there at the intersections.
But you also notice that it's targeting basically the thoroughfares through Rowlett. Pretty much south and east west. And then we discussed earlier in this conversation about staying on top of roads and our PCIs. And one of the things during our tour was that we did notice where a road that had a really low PCI, we could look at it, and there were maybe 2 panels that needed to be replaced that were brought back up to the PCI of 98 or something. So we want to go ahead and address 6 million, which is approximately what we've done over the historical time frame for a while now. 2 million per year towards panel replacements. And those, which panels those are will be dictated by staff and requirements. Construction funding projects design that are in design. Let's break these down. Merritt Road design is already fully funded. A lot of my thunder was stolen earlier by Jeff. But basically, we have a $2.4 million shortfall for that entire project. And that's a 4-lane divided roadway from George Bush all the way to Chisa with the bike trail, sidewalks, lighting, and trees. And then we have 2 items from the 2021 bond plan that funded just the full design and construction. Those are Total Business Park and Country Air Estates. So what we're asking for is $2.53 million each to fund the second half phase 2 construction, which is a Total Business Park, basically they're Lane Bond Drive and Singleton Street. And the Country Air Estates, it would be Swiss Way and Salzburg between Richmond Court and Occoquan Drive. Then we have Chisa Road design. We want to design it from Miller Road to 66, and that'll then give us that additional thoroughfare all the way from Dow Rock on Chisa up to 66.
And also I think the total construction cost was what, 17 million? Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then it would be 15 after this.
Right, okay. Yeah, because this is just design. Just that 4-lane delay, concrete roadway with the street lights, landscaping, design and associated water, sewer, storm utilities.
I have a question. Jeff, is that the long-term plan for this road and the master thoroughfare plan to be a 4-lane divided collector?
I would have to take a look at that, the MTP. I believe we don't. Chisa Road is from
It's
Dow Rocks.
This area, I believe the current master thoroughfare plan designates it as a 6-lane.
Well, It's an outdated system. That's kind of ridiculous.
Thank you.
If I could ask a quick question, so what is on Chisa south of Miller, there is construction there, that's being widened, so how's that funded? Is that already, that's got separate funding, so this is everything basically probably down to like the bend there or something?
It's
Oh,
from,
that's a different.
We're going the other way. We're going from Miller.
We've already funded the other.
Miller North, oh,
We're
okay.
going north to 66.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm sorry.
If you want to look at the future with regard to East Chisa as a roadway, think of it as going from 190 by the connector down Chisa, what we're proposing here on North Chisa, north of Miller Road. South of Miller Road is currently being, it's designed and it will be constructed. And then you have the connection to Sapphire Bay. So that would be one pathway for people coming from north to go by the connector, by Chisa, Tall Rock, Sapphire Bay. This would be the ultimate way of envisioning how this roadway looks.
I use cheese almost daily, so I know. I have an appreciation for that.
So then we're asking also for 7.3 million, and this is for the design and construction of Shrady Road from Chisa Road to Dow Rock Road. That's gonna basically replace an existing 2-lane asphalt roadway with a 2-lane undivided concrete roadway. And sidewalks design would be for design construction, sidewalks, streets, street lighting, as well as associated stormwater drains. And this one is somewhat important because with the relocation of fire station number 2 on Strady Road, it will have the additional wear and tear of that heavy equipment rolling either north or south, trading
East or west.
east west. One way or the other, up to right, coming out of the station.
Does Shrady already have an accompanying trail that would go east-west from,
Well, I think that's part of the future plan.
Right.
to connect to the trail that's off the
Yeah,
delta?
it would go here.
Okay.
John, for these last 2 projects that you've talked about, I mean, what are the acquisitions, I mean, where are we at, maybe city manager? Acquisitions for Chisa North, acquisitions, land.
Oh, I don't know.
Are we gonna need to do?
CIP, I don't think we've done anything.
No, there's not.
for Chisa to go from Miller to 66, no, that's part of the project cost.
Okay, because I know going south, that is,
That's
that's the big issue.
that's fine.
And then trade, no issues that we know of.
No issues.
Well,
There may be
There will
acquisitions
be-
It'll be
needed.
a part of the project.
It would be a part of the project.
Okay.
Shrady should have nearly the same footprint, because
Yeah,
it's
'cause
still a
it's
two-lane
two-lane,
concrete.
yeah.
Right.
it just, the sidewalks expand the right way and then your power movements and all that. So.
I don't think there's anything alongside that road. Ditch.
Yeah, already did.
Hopefully there won't be any rush. Yeah. And then, we were asked to look at $500,000 for construction of sidewalk connects. Those pictures, by the way, are not necessarily what sidewalks we're talking about, it's just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. Very similar, like if you run it down Lakeview Parkway, you'll see where, the sidewalks are in front of some businesses and then disappear, and then reappear again. We want to go ahead and just make those contiguous so that you can actually use them for sidewalks.
Yeah, I think the point that you were saying was, these, I wouldn't even look at these photos because I think the point of the CIPTF was to connect dead-end sidewalks along your major thoroughfares like Lakeview Parkway, Road, things like that, not necessarily residential neighborhoods.
And then another $500,000 to repair or reconstruct the existing city-owned and city-maintained screening walls. And I guess we should note that city-owned walls, I don't know if do we have to do?
It's HOAs that have.
They've been in.
But it's city-maintained, which are,
But you also based on some planning that occurred as well.
okay, which is,
Yeah.
is a good issue. It's the city maintained screening walls that are, the ones that people should be aware that, that's an HOA that went defunct, which now borders a thoroughfare that we need to maintain that wall for. Just don't want anybody to get an idea that they should have their HOA going with the faults and fixing the walls. So, the last item is streets, and alleys for reconstruction, and we were graciously provided Reams paper on this particular project. And, the PCI for, the most recent PCI. And when we went out and started to look at roads compared to PCIs, it became evident fairly rapidly that there was a disconnect somewhere. And in fact, maybe we thought that maybe the 99s are supposed to be the ones, and the ones are supposed to be high bottom.
Exactly.
I mean, it was just all over the place. So it was decided that we should use the 2018 data along with the 2021 data, I believe, 2022 data.
No, we don't have 2018 was the
Yeah.
latest. We updated it based on relevant data, based on things we've already addressed, but overall, the baseline of it was 2018.
The baseline was 2018, but we will use, city staff has went through and used everything that they know, the personal experience, their maintenance records, and all that. He gave us another list, which again, based on the quantity, was just over $100 million. So we decided that it would probably, because there's several ways to approach this, and that's by individual street, but we would also need to know whether or not the cost was per street alone, or street and utilities, or if there had to be drainage, storm drain installed. Would the cost then be better if we did them in communities, so that those storm drains would all be installed at one time? Just, there's a whole lot of questions that a CIPTF, or task force for short, were just not equipped to answer. So it was decided that we could, I believe that 20.95 million might actually be able to go up to 40.95 million.
Well,
Based on that plan.
No, we're asking for 20.95 million to be allocated for streets and alleyway reconstruction, and allow the staff the opportunity to be able to figure out the best use of that money based on street condition, proximities, utilities that are needed, etc.
so you did a good job of explaining that, kind of where we're at. Also go into a little bit more depth on the PCI and when we were on the bus taking a tour as a task force, it, like he said, it became evident very quickly that something was wrong. We would turn down streets that were supposedly failing and realize that, nothing's wrong here. There's not even a crack in the road. What are you talking about? Then we go down streets that were miserable, and yet they were rated, they were good. So something was wrong. What we realized in analyzing the data was that RAS, based on instruction by staff at the time, was to evaluate intersections and not the entire length of the road. So instead of doing it, evaluating the street based on 10 foot, 10 foot evaluate, 10 foot here, 10 foot, they would just go to the end of the street and say, okay, that's the evaluation. So it was just bad data that the CIPTF could not use in evaluating. Additionally, I have a question for probably Jeff, staff, that when we left the last CIPTF meeting, we had shifted the 1.3 million from erosion control to streets and alleys, which would actually total $22.25 million, but that doesn't seem to have carried over in this $20.95 million. Remember that the initial erosion control amount was 3 million, we took that down to 1.7, that leaves 1.3, we're gonna wrap that into streets and alleys, which would have been 22.25 million. Do you recall that as well?
When I was 20.95.
Yeah.
I know that the number for erosion control, together with all the other projects, that erosion control number is 175, they add up to 979. And then the fire station, the
Well,
fire station.
I'm saying that the initial erosion control ask was $3 million.
And it went down to 175.
CIPTF said, no, we're gonna do 1.7. We took that difference of 1.3 million and allocated to streets and alleys, which would have carried over, but it doesn't seem to have carried over on the presentation. That would have brought it up to $22.25 million.
Well, what I can say about that is I definitely know that we started off with our target.
Yes.
We took Parks and Recreation, we took public safety, we started on roads and very rapidly realized that the 1/3, 2/3 allocation wasn't gonna be good because we definitely had a larger need in roads. So we went back and reevaluated Parks and Recreation. We went back and reevaluated public safety. And then whatever we could save out of that, we asked to do it, protect the roads and alleyways. And we looked at our specific projects in roads and alleyways, and then the rest of it just goes to street maintenance.
Thank you. I just remember vividly that the CIPTF made that decision to shift that $1.3 million. So is that, going back to those records, just want to make sure that that is.
I can go back and look at the spreadsheets, but we're adding up to 63, and I know that there is over 48 million in the streets, alleys, and other related category.
And I think what happened was that ended up getting eroded by the signal cabinets or the.
Yeah, I got something for you
Because
there.
those were the three that weren't.
That was already, but I'll go back and take a look at the spreadsheet.
Thank you.
We can review our notes from the
Yeah.
meeting, because I have a little bit different notes from the meeting. We were gonna change the parking lot to 2.2 million and add 800,000 to streets and alleys. So we'll go back and look and make sure we have that correct.
Okay.
These numbers are correct.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring. Then I want to go back to, I'm sorry, are you done with the presentation?
Sure.
I'm
I'd like to make a comment here with regard to staff making decisions with regard to reconstruction on streets and alleys. On the left, you have streets, on the right, you have all the alleys highlighted in the red. You can see that there are concentrations, probably referring to the geographic group. If there's a particular neighborhood and has problems with their infrastructure, as for example, the curbs and some of the electrical or maybe water or drainage is failing. And an example would be where there is flooding in the street and it's not draining. If it's within that particular geographic group, a neighborhood, then the decision could be made by staff or the council to replace the entire thing. That is to go in and rehabilitate the neighborhood rather than just the streets. However, if you're just changing out panels, that's just a panel change, and much less expensive, and therefore that's why you could probably have 22 million or $23 million go into streets and alleys and related projects. But it's going to have that flexibility so that in this case, the last two words there are estimated cost. So that if you choose, and I'll refer to the question with regard to Parks and Recreation and trails. Trails component in the Parks and Recreation was only $500,000. I would prefer that any savings that would be made on on streets and alleys and related projects go back to Parks and Rec. So that aid in completing, not entirely, but completing partially the trail system in the city of Rowlett.
That, I don't think that'd be possible if depending on propositions. If you have a streets proposition
Correct.
and you have savings within that proposition, those savings have to remain in that proposition. So you couldn't do that by law, but I hear you.
But then again, if the street included a trail going by it.
Yeah. So I want to go back to Councilmember Britton's question on traffic signals. So the current quote of $3.8 million is not completely accurate in terms of what I have done research on and have gotten a quote from a company that does traffic signal box installations across the state of Texas. The quote that I have here is $1.9 million. That's based on replacing 27 signal boxes with all new technology, brand new controller, new vehicle detection software. This would be a solution that also would allow for AI to be utilized in traffic signal timing optimization for Lakeview Parkway. So it included all of that. It's broken out here that I have. Total is $1.9 million. My recommendation was going to be based on that number, which is more solidified based on an accurate quote, would be that we reduce the $3.8 million allocated to traffic signals and put it to $2.8 million. So while the quote I have here is 1.9, the 2.8 would still provide sufficient room for if there were any other changes that need to be made, or maybe additional signal boxes need to be purchased for other intersections, even though the 27 is currently what we have in stock right now. And any other changes with the intersection, if we need to replace back plates for the signals or light heads. But that's my recommendation. That would raise our capacity from $10 to $11 million if we were to go with the proposal from item 2B. That's kind of what I'm throwing out.
How many floppy disks did I give us?
So it would replace all of our floppy disks, and it would use the latest and greatest technology.
That's we got it.
Yeah.
What is a realistic timeline? I mean, we haven't gone, yeah.
For this?
For capital replacement.
So, and you could do it way less than 12 months.
Okay.
You could do it way less.
We need to.
That's not urgent.
Yeah.
We'll see all.
All right, Mayor, so, hate to contradict you, but I kind of have to. Your assumption is based on a different system. So I would offer to counter that it may leave us in a position where if we don't go with that advanced system, that we're left underfunded. And I'm okay with that, if the city's okay with that, but I think we have to make sure from our perspective that we're saying 27 signal or 24 cabinets are gonna get X, and if we reduce that money, we may not have the ability, if we don't go in a different system, which I believe is the one you're proposing, then it could potentially leave us in a deficit situation.
So then where did the $6 million estimate come from a couple weeks ago?
$6 million? I don't know.
For traffic signals. It was CIPTF got that email that, no, never mind, signals are not gonna be 3.8, they're gonna be 6 million.
Right, not to drop to 15, and then I call.
There was some misunderstanding because it looked as though the quote from a much earlier quote had been doubled essentially, but that was not the case. But we did get some accurate quotes, and we can fund the 24 locations with 3.8.
And my worry is just being mindful.
Well, how is it that we have a quote to replace all the signal boxes for 3.8, and the mayor has a quote for 1.9 that accomplishes virtually the same thing, but maybe even a little better? I'm having a real struggle in my mind reconciling those two numbers, because
So here's my position. and Mayor, you may want to, I hope you speak to this more, because I think this is a good opportunity. The mayor does have a system that he's investigated that has a lot of promise. We think it's interesting. But that's not our decision to make as staff, right? So I have to speak to this, because if you decide you don't want to go with that system, you're gonna probably still want 24 cabinets. Now, why these, I'll call them cabinets that don't seem as advanced as the ones that the mayor referred to, I certainly am not expert enough to tell you why that is. I don't know if anyone in this room can.
So I guess I can get more specific.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
I wasn't.
Well, I think it's
I
probably
wasn't
the best
planning,
place.
but I will. So I've done a lot of analysis of this particular system that is starting to be implemented across the United States, actually the world. It's a company that is headquartered out of Israel. They have developed a technology that utilizes AI optimization for signal technology. By virtue of doing that, they have created their own patented vehicle detection software and cameras that are able to integrate the AI, so that way the traffic signals on your major thoroughfares like Lakeview Parkway, for example, would not be just on a time setting. So currently, as it sits, your traditional traffic signal technology, and probably what has been quoted, is that the detector would see the vehicle and then the countdown would start. So it's not really smart technology. It's just basically, it's registered the vehicle. Now the clock starts on the countdown. The clock is based on our studies that we've put into the controller of traffic, the traffic load. But the thing is that is not an ever-changing, that is not a constantly updating traffic impact. This would actually use algorithms based on your ever-changing traffic conditions, based on time, based on the time during the day. Let's say we started to see heavy traffic because 30 was closed. It would consistently upgrade its timing, so that way signals are getting reasonable time to really move traffic through the intersections. So it's not a constantly, the timing is the same, all the signals, it's always ever-changing. Yes.
A question. The signals are in the same box, same bucket as the roads, right?
Yes,
So as long as we stay within those basic parameters, we're good. I'm not sure that at this point, do we have to delineate, we're gonna spend 1.9 or 3.8? It's all in the same bucket.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure this is a decision we have to make right now.
It's not. It's this point that I was bringing up, that we could free up an additional $1 million in capacity, which is a big number that could go to something else. So that was my only point for bringing this up, is that there is that option available.
Right.
I guess
Once again, our recommendations were based on the numbers that were given to us, and my recommendation, as part of the task force, would be, Mayor, give the city that quote so that they're.
Oh, I have.
Not Jeff, who's the,
Oh, I have.
Right.
Right, so that Brett can read it and be able to go, whether it's apples to apples, oranges to oranges.
Yep, they have it.
that's such a large swing in cost. I just feel like, I'm not informed, but what's the name of the company that you're looking at?
So the company would be Texas Highway Products, but the vehicle detection software is No Traffic. And I'd encourage y'all to do y'all's own research on them as well.
Yeah, I mean, it just, the cost swing just raises some questions, why is that?
Well, that's why I kind of got into investigating this more,
Yeah.
because I wasn't sure of the price. So
Is it installed in any other city?
yes, City of Dallas, all of Richardson. You have parts of Plano, Garland. I mean, it's starting to pop up. And
So the cybersecurity, considering what just happened in the city of Dallas, wouldn't that be a concern?
with what?
Cybersecurity,
What?
break into the system.
I mean, that could happen
Taking out
to
the account for
anything.
some-
Yeah.
Well, that's, once again, it's just a red flag when you're looking at dollars and cents difference.
This would integrate.
That would happen with any system that we purchased today.
I
Because
had
it's
experience
most of
with
it would be.
really many years ago. granted. And my experience at that point was, problem came up, you had to speak with someone in Israel. So, you know, do your due diligence. I mean, all up and down the line, that is my recommendation. Not just go to their website and say what a great system there.
So to that point, we've contemplated, and we're not ready to really announce it, kind of trying to have perhaps a targeted trial area, about 5 of these, I think we were looking at, because we have some areas where controllers have to be replaced anyway, and we were gonna maybe contemplate a trial run. We're working through the financing and the money part of that. We've begun reaching out and getting some feedback from some cities. I don't think we're prepared to give it, I mean, we're not prepared to give any kind of a position or thoughts or anything. Aware of the we have had numerous conversations about it. My point isn't to tell you yes or no, it is I have to have an obligation because we don't know what you're gonna do. You may ultimately say we don't want the system. And so I wanna be clear that that proposal isn't the same as what we showed you. So it doesn't seem that we're so incredibly inept. We may be at times where we're not so incredibly inept that we've given you a quote that's $1 million less for the same product. You know, that's my point. And so you may ultimately, as the council and otherwise, decide to go with this. Great, I mean, we'll implement it. But if you decide you don't, then you will be staring at a deficit. Now, to your point, council member, I don't know what the remaining balance would be with the differential between it. So I don't want to interrupt the mayor's point there. Because maybe we leave it in that bucket of money and then, but I don't know. So.
My suggestion was 2.8 million instead of 3.8, even though the quote is 1.9, to include any potential things that have been missed, although
That still limits your options, to his point.
Listen, it was a suggestion.
Yeah,
If we want to leave it at 3.8, let's leave it at 3.8.
We can still go with that system.
It ain't gonna be 3.8, but that's okay.
Well, and that's sort of, I think, what Elise was bringing up, is it's in that bucket, we can move it. I think I would rather know that it was fully funded, regardless of what system we pick. And then if we choose the less expensive, we pick up $1 million, that's fine, we can do it within that bucket. But it doesn't, to your point, leave us at a shortfall. We're taking $1 million out, committed it directly to something else, and now we're fine. We kind of shortened ourselves.
Well, I think in the beginning, David said we're not being able to make any decisions today or anywhere.
That's right.
So I have another question. In regards to a traffic signal, you've got the control box, which is what we're talking about as far as replacement here. And then you've got all the masts and the lights and the opticoms and the detection unit, right? Are there more pieces than that I'm not aware of? So,
No, this quote would include.
and this is just the control boxes, but are all the other components working? All the other components are included?
Yes. So
It's a great sound. I'm not speaking against the system, be clear.
I'm gonna make sure.
I'm just talking about if the city doesn't migrate to that system, just be aware. I have an obligation to make you aware, and that's that, and you guys debate the value of the system.
Sorry, I'm not asking the question between what his quote offers or not. I'm asking what the CIPTF included in what they proposed.
And Jeff, what's that?
Without it in front of me, I can't recite it exactly, but I know there was Opticom equipment and detection equipment. Now, certainly not the signal heads themselves or the right.
It's the electronics to run and operate, so the cabinet and anything that would be mounted to the signals to make.
So from that standpoint, we have at least some of that equipment in the city that's not working today. Is that a fair statement?
Well, in order to upgrade, that's.
Or we're doing it because of the necessity.
That we're talking about.
That's correct.
We do. We have at least 5 that we know of.
Okay, so this replaces those 5 plus all the rest of it, all the rest of the detection equipment, the opticoms. We've already done some opticom replacements, but
I don't know. I mean, Jeff would have to.
Each cabinet, there's a per cabinet quote, and that includes all of the equipment that we've just itemized for you, and apply that to 24, and you get 3.8.
okay, that helps because when I think of it's to replace 24 cabinets, I imagine the big aluminum cabinet that sits on the side of the road. that's what we're replacing.
Yeah,
We're actually
plus,
talking about.
plus the ancillary, what I would consider, like Becky said, that attaches to the system, and the software and the equipment inside the cabinet has to work with that electronics equipment that's mounted on the mast arm.
Does that include any upgrades we would have to make at the Public Works office for technology to manage the system?
That, I don't believe that it does. I don't believe there is any.
So if it doesn't, then it's not a comprehensive.
No, I don't know that there is.
Or there wouldn't be a
software.
disaster.
It's just the communication between the transportation management system and the signals is just internet. I don't.
Can we get you more definitive answers? I think this bears that we should be able to tell you what components are contained in this quote, and to answer some of the questions you've asked. We're gonna talk about this again on the 5th, so can you be prepared to more fully address those concerns and questions then?
That'd be great. Actually, answer those questions now.
My fear is,
3.8 million needs to solve this issue.
Understood.
It needs to solve a whole issue.
Yep. And so we'll be better prepared to answer that question on the 5th.
Okay, last question, and this is because I actually don't know and I see it all the time. Who maintains the timing for all the signals within the city, including those along Highway 66 and including those at PGPT and 66?
We do.
Does the city
We do.
manage all of it?
We do.
Okay. Thank you.
Based on data from 2012.
I have other questions about the other things, but I don't know if there's more to discuss on the city cabinets.
You get it all with 1.9 million dollars. You get it all. Use cloud software, everything. Anyways, all right. I get it though. I get it.
All right, maybe a question for staff on the Merritt Road interconnector, the funding that's being requested. How does the TERS number 4 play into that? Does that supplement
You mean
that?
with respect to the development that's going on there now?
Yes.
I think we talked about that just a moment ago. We will answer that. The Jackson Shaw project specifically is what you're referring to. They're in the TERS. And I remember I asked you earlier, what about Jackson and Shaw and their portion?
They're going 1,100 feet.
Right. So
That's not included.
that's not included in that
It's a
portion.
separate portion.
Separate
So
project.
that's a supplemental. The TERS will supplement what we're bonding and what.
No, the TERS has no impact for us
Okay.
on this. For us. It will impact part of the road, but that's going to be the part that's being completed by
By Jackson
Jackson
Shaw.
Shaw.
Okay. All right. The Chisa Road design bond money. I sometimes have an issue with the fact that we separate design and construction, and I understand that, design takes a significant amount of time. But in this particular case, we're talking about Chisa Road design, and I'm wondering how far that goes. Does it go to talking about right-of-way acquisition, or is this strictly engineering, design, utility easement assessments, and all that kind of stuff?
Essentially, yes. Not acquisition. It's the preparation of construction documents.
All right, so if we issue this, if this were to get approved by voters, if we were going to go on a bond package and they get approved by voters, when would we actually start the design? When would we be looking at a timeline for construction? Would this be like?
Well, the bonds are not sold until
When we funded.
August, right?
Right, so it's
July?
fair. That's not really a question for Jeff, I suppose. It's a kind of question for council.
Well, that's right. And it's a funding question.
Yeah. Okay.
It's whenever we decide 15 million.
I mean, we obviously wouldn't want to fund it in 2024, get the design done, and then have to wait until the next bond cycle in 2027 to consider construction.
Well,
That's exactly what would probably happen.
That's-
You don't have that money. That's the reality of many of these large-scale CIP projects in any city.
Hence the frustration with the design and then
Understood.
build.
The alternative is just to select one project and fund it for both design and construction and move through. And then what happens is you potentially delay the movement of other projects.
Right.
It's
I mean,
money.
like, for example, like the Schrading Road included design and construction, but that's because it's a much more limited
more affordable.
project and scope, with Chisa being in a pretty extraordinary project with most of the issues are gonna be tied up in right-of-way acquisition, and the infrastructure that would have to go in as well. That would be really a lot of the cost. But really, it's what we've done with Miller Road, it's what we've done with, well, no, we didn't do that with Chisa. but fund the design first, and it sucks because you're tying up $2 million for something that you can't see with your eyes.
Right.
But it isn't necessary to get to that point in future years.
Okay, last question, and you touched on this a little bit, Mr. Gelman, but neighborhood repair or reconstruction. So on the map that you pointed out, there's a few neighborhoods that it essentially looks like we're reconstructing the neighborhood because there's so many repairs that are happening. But those are bundled into the streets and alleys for reconstruction bucket. Is there a reason for the methodology to do it this way versus historically we've done like Lakewood, was it Lakewood, Lakeside, Lake something estates?
You also did Kenwood.
Okay, another good example. So we in the past we've done like a holistic neighborhood reconstruction. Is there a reason for grouping it differently this time around as
No.
opposed to that?
These were the mapping of the streets that were an issue. And as a consequence, it just happens that they are in particular neighborhoods. And that's often a reflection of the developer and compromises that they have with their design when the construction existed at a particular time.
And some of it's just timing, right? The whole neighborhood's built at one time, so everything fails at one time,
Yes.
right? But, you know, we have a couple other, Country Air Estates is the one I was thinking of. Country Air Estates, Toller Business Park, those are funding for projects that are in design, but this time around, we're not identifying, you know, aside from the map that you provided, we're not saying we're doing a reconstruction of these three neighborhoods.
That's why we suggested we left it up to staff to make that evaluation.
Okay.
And I think any input also would come from council as well as staff to make that kind of decision. Depends upon the concentration of damage that really exists and the evaluation.
And maybe a more comprehensive PCI assessment might accompany that.
Well, as well as any infrastructure associated with the repairs.
Right.
Right. As far as the total road and the country air estates are, we're asking that money just to complete.
Yeah,
this project.
totally understand.
We're in the design. We're in the, well, Cheese Road will be here in 2020, 2030.
Yeah, I don't disagree with those at all. It was more a question of process about the way we've done things historically has been to identify a neighborhood and say, we're going to reconstruct this neighborhood versus the change now to say, there are neighborhoods that we are kind of targeting, but we're more so leaving that up to staff to make those assessments and decisions.
Correct.
It would have been possible to apply criteria ranking.
Because we don't have the information.
Well, and it's not, the staff isn't making decisions, they're making recommendations to the city council.
I was gonna say that, we're not making decisions.
So that way, we still have the ability to analyze the proposed project, and if there are any issues, we can inquire upon those issues, and if there's another way to do it, then we can suggest that. So, yeah.
Yeah, John, can I borrow your red pen and put Suzanne?
Oh, wow. Questions? Oh. I mean, I was gonna get to, I guess that's where we can get to the hypotheticals. I have some hypotheticals here.
So I did have, one question, in the parks part. What about scenic paint bridge?
Great question. So, Scenic Point Park has been closed since October of 2022 due to structural failing issues with the rotting of multiple piers, I guess you'd say. They pretty much have completely eroded and no longer touch the ground. They no longer holding up the bridge. So it's a safety hazard. Yeah, and you can speak to this part as well regarding the initial investigation by staff, which suggests that it will be in the multiple of millions of dollars to to repair it, and not just repair it, but not repair it with the same solution that ended up failing so quickly. That being said, we're looking at potential of $5 million for that project alone, which is very extensive for something that really serves, I'm gonna be pretty frank here, but it serves an apartment complex. It doesn't necessarily serve the entire city, although I'm sure many people have used that bridge that don't live there. But as it sits, that's what it's doing. So I kind of threw out an idea that we consider in the future, sometime soon, of creating a tax increment reinvestment zone for that part of the city that would go stretch up all the way to Cottonwood Creek, which is a currently undeveloped about 800 single-family home neighborhood. With that, we could realize by a percentage of the property tax in that district, we could realize some revenue in that TERS and issue revenue bonds out of that TERS to reconstruct Scenic Point Park and do some other things within that TERS district that we could identify along the way. Certain road improvements, things of that nature. So that was going to be my suggestion, that instead of tying it up in the 24 bond, which would eat, again, $5 million of capacity for one project, that we be a little bit more creative and out of the box with how we approach that problem. Does that, questions on that? Do you have anything to add to that?
The only thing I have to add to that, really to kind of address from a maintenance or an operations perspective, there just isn't enough money in an M&O budget to address the degree of failure that exists in the Scenic Point Park. You may recall, staff did go out and attempted to get some estimates. They were expensive. Maybe it wasn't fully investigatory in that way, so we tried to get quotes for specialized engineers, and the quote alone for their analysis was over $200,000 just for the analysis. And so from a budgetary standpoint, the money just isn't there. This would have to be something that would be part of a debt issuance. And it was presented to the CIPTF, and you were there, of course. It didn't quite make the cut. So we did have some conversations about alternative ways to solve this problem. And the only thing we come up with is the conversation about TERS. How do you fund this level of infrastructure without either issuing debt? Well, you have the ability to capture some of that increment and use it for infrastructure. So,
and not just for Scenic Point either.
No, you could acquire, and I'm gonna cut you off, but you can talk about acquiring potentially. One of the things that the city talks about is that it's on the water. Yet there's a paucity of really publicly available lakefront spaces. And so something like a TERS in this area that we looked at could potentially fund the acquisition and or development of more publicly accessible park lake areas.
I just think it's an important point to bring up so that it's still part of the conversation.
Very much so.
Because I feel like something needs to be happening with it instead of it just being fenced off.
Yeah.
Well, the other option that's been discussed, let's bring it out, rip the thing out.
Well,
which would cost money.
It would cost money, but I don't think the mayor's being facetious. One of the things that when I first got here, it was a big deal, and we spent some time looking at it. And as I started looking into this park, and particularly you start to understand that the park doesn't even have legitimate parking on its own. Kind of one of the trailheads in the parking area is on the property of the Terra-Lago apartment complex. It's not city-owned. It's not city parking. Well, when you start talking about a park and public access, there are some challenges with this truly being anything but a small pocket park for that community. We think of it as a city park, and we have controlled it, but when you talk about true utilization, it isn't a city park. And there are some challenges that are physical in nature and otherwise. And so there is something that the city, in my opinion, should contemplate: the cost of the investment to either rehabilitate or improve that park, which will still have, without significant capital dollars, limited access, or some other alternative design that maybe still leverages the beauty of the landscape, but perhaps not that scenic outlook, right? And then potentially spending those dollars to accomplish what I've heard many of the council members say is the desire to have more, greater, larger, better, publicly accessible lakefront area. It's definitely part of an ongoing continuous conversation, definitely not forgotten. We don't have the ability right now to take action because of the funding, but it's definitely not forgotten.
When it comes to funding, again, this was a part that's relatively new. I would think that it came nowhere near meeting its expected lifetime, and that an A&E firm developed it. And I would think that they'd probably have some liability associated with it.
We won't go there.
Yeah.
We're not gonna go there. That's a conversation for another day.
Muddled as to how the
Yeah.
park was developed, what entity developed it, and honestly, it's been muddled trying to even get that background.
Point, but
Because it
yeah.
was associated with the apartment complex, is that?
No, we just, when it comes to discussion of liability and risk,
The
that's
executive
probably something that's not to be recorded. Although.
Questions
we
of law are
understand.
usually best held for executive session, that's why the TOMA provides that as an exception.
So that's why
And
City
what-
Park is not included in the recommendation.
So, this is the part where, there's nothing else on the agenda, so this is where we can go into some hypotheticals on, hypothetically, if we were to identify the additional $10 million of capacity based on movement from expenditures. What?
The increased capacity, just want to, a small clarifying point. The increased capacity is simply a matter of Christoph's presentation, debt restructuring,
Yes.
right? Reamortization and other things. How much capacity you have will ultimately be your decision to tell us. You can have 10 million, or you could even have more if you keep more than that's going to be a decision you all make with us. We offered up 10 million as i.e. kind of the compromise, 7 million from the CapEx. If you could make us eat all the remaining 7 million, which I hope you don't, but you could.
No, that was going based off of that suggestion that we realize or move over $700,000 worth of M&O expenditures to the INS, which would create additional $7 million in INS capacity, on top of the already $3 million in INS capacity. So $10 million in capacity for issuing other, funding other projects, really. So I kind of wanted to go over kind of our wish list items that are for consideration on that future, really to discuss further at that future date, but just to kind of throw it out there for staff to kind of take down and take notes on what some of our wish list items are. So
Are we asking the CIPTF for any input on these items?
we can,
That they have built the priority list,
yes,
so I'm wondering how much.
on the 63 million, yes.
Okay.
I've got a list that I'll go over.
Well, this is the 14.
So while they're doing, yeah, while they're gathering, oh no, you have it. Is that the total 14 or just the 8?
Total 14.
Sorry.
We're up to erosion control. After that is, in terms of priority, trail construction, $3 million. Shady Blue Line, Phase 2 is $1.5 million. Addition to the Rowlett Community Center would be a $7 million. And, I think that covers almost 10.
What we can do is we can have staff email this list to us with the
Yeah.
I think the total amount was around 17. for all of the projects, something more than that. 38.
About
38.
36.
36.
36 acres.
Yeah, 36, okay. And then we'll ask for staff to send this
Do
list.
you want it now, Mayor? We'll see if we can get it now.
Sure, that'd be.
Should be able to.
I have, if y'all need an example of what I'm talking about, it's here.
Might be on share.
What's all on it?
The reason I asked is.
I mean, where to go?
Prioritization, and you were there for all that, Mayor, as being part of the CIPTF, so. You kind of know where the big rocks are.
Yeah, the priorities were based on that $63 million capacity, yes. And then these other suggestions were staff suggestions on, what other capital projects are there identified as potentials. I have here what we didn't cover out of this, and that's because Capital Improvement Program Task Force didn't have the information of the additional capacity and the knowledge of shifting certain capital expenditures like M&O and INS. Did you have something? You look like you have asphalt road maintenance. That obviously would be a shorter term bond because the lifespan is not long. But I would like to shift that to allow us to do more than what we do, which is only $200,000 a year, to fund it at $3 million for asphalt road maintenance, since we have a lot of blacktop asphalt roads that are not maintained well. This allows us the resources to have better maintenance program and not have the issues that we have being so far behind our asphalt projects. Funding it at $200,000 to $400,000 a year is not, that doesn't do one at all. $3 million alone gets you 4 or 5 streets, which we know there are more needs than that. But again, the lifespan of these roads is not great.
When you say the maintenance fund for this, I'm sorry, maybe this is a question for you. What does the asphalt maintenance fund cover? Is that rehabilitation, stripping, and resurfacing, or is it?
Whatever it can, pothole repair, that doesn't go
So-
very far. If you were to resurface one road, you need up to 200,000.
Right.
One normal size road. We have quotes right now for Brady,
Schrading, Castle,
Miller, and, oh my goodness, I'm forgetting. But
I just wanna be
each
sure
of
that-
those roads is over $200,000.
Yeah, I just want to be sure when we say that what this is for, what it can potentially cover.
Well, it could potentially cover anything from a complete asphalt road reconstruction to milling and overlay to pothole repair.
And thank you for bringing that, because what we've done, we've never done a total asphalt reconstruction. We've only ever done an overlay, so that means taking off the very top layer, scratching it off, putting on a new layer. But in some cases, these roads, the base has failed, which would necessitate a total reconstruction, which now you're talking a different price range. $200,000 is going to cover 1 foot. So $3 million, while it's not the greatest, it is something, and it's something that's a lot more than what we have available today.
It's multiple years worth of funding at the current level, so
Correct.
that's a huge step.
So that would be one wish list item I'm going to throw out there for staff to write down. I'm gonna let others go, and then I'll come back. And I don't want to take up all of it, so.
We may have already added this to the list, but I would really like to see the funding gap for Lakefront at the Conroe Park be met, whatever that gap is.
$400,000 I have.
So between what we initially.
Slow down just a moment for me. Becky's going to
Sure.
record this, but she's also in the process of sending that list out too.
Okay.
Pause and then when you're ready.
I'm sorry about that.
The difference was about, okay,
Ready.
Yes, whatever the funding gap is for Lakefront at the Conroe Park, the kayak launch, the parking, whatever other amenities were planned to be there originally, so that we don't lose out on what we originally had in scope for people.
and phase 1 was gonna, like you said, it's really to cover the gap for phase 1. That's not even phase 2. And I had that here as 400,000 because it was about 350, 360 of the gap. And given inflation and potential price changes, was the round up figure.
Yeah, okay, here's my ask. I would like $200,000 plus the $38,000 in unused bond money for the nature trail to do both the parking lot, just basically caliche or rock.
So we'll say 238 because we're not clear if we can actually utilize that 30 inches.
Okay, well then I'll ask for
So we'll say
250.
250.
Let's say 250, and then if you can back that down, that's fine. But that would include, right, obviously, I think some of it said the fence already, and the parking lot, which even if you rock it is acceptable. But the big thing is the trail surface itself has to be.
And which location?
Nature for
Nature
Nature.
trail. Nature trail.
Nature trail.
And this will be, they put $50,000 into it, last year, I guess. It probably did, I don't know, maybe 15, maybe 20% of it for 50 grand. So I'm feeling like 250 can do both the parking lot and what needs to be done. But it's in desperate need 4
Well,
years ago.
Right now, it's unusable. You just,
Well, I use it every day, but it's, that one was wet.
great, it's not a great trail, huh?
It's not a great trail. It's not accessible to any sort of,
Human being.
Well, ADA, it just has to be done. It's been one of my crusades.
Sir, you all don't have to convince us. We're here to report this.
So that,
He's trying to convince us. to
Okay, and what we're gonna do
I'm
is
selling
take
it,
this
I'm selling it.
and bring this back to all of you to
Yeah.
kind of look at and
He's
deliberate.
trying to convince his colleagues. Councilman?
I really do want to ask, I really do like what the Councilman Wade just said. I'd like to see that to come to fruition.
Councilmember Bowers?
You know, off the top of my head, I don't know. I'm gonna have to give it consideration.
And we will be back with this conversation on the 5th.
I got a list here worth about that much.
Well, and I would be interested to hear what
I
everyone
had to
has
get
to
to
say.
it.
Just off the top of my head, without having given it any consideration.
Understood.
I agree with, like, Macomb Grove. Thank you. Sorry, all these ones come together. Macomb Grove, I think, doing that. And I would just posit that whether it's 3.9 million or 1.9 million traffic lights, everyone will agree to that. But I do appreciate you, Mayor, for looking to find a way to save money. I think taxpayers appreciate that. Those are the two big ones I have.
Yeah, I didn't come prepared with a wish list for specifics, but I totally agree with you about the asphalt maintenance. I think, I wish we could do more than that. So I guess I could put in it and then you can.
Well, I found another meme.
That's
And those traffic signals was good. But, you know.
Prove the system and we'll do it.
Yeah, well, hey. Okay, so this is really, it's a wish list, so I understand if there's not much buying to it. But I would like to see us put some money where our mouth is on downtown. I have here $1.5 million, and this is not to fund a specific thing, but multiple things to really accomplish a lot. We have a quote for $260,000 to install permanent power for food trucks in our downtown green space. So those are 220 volt power outlets, multiple of them. Also reduces the generator noise you hear out there when you're trying to shop and it's just loud. This would eliminate that. You have things like installation of artwork, murals or other pieces that stand on their own to really energize the downtown space. Improve monument signage for better placemaking, and then potentially the city manager's wish list item is overhead lights along Main Street, which would really enhance that drive as you're in our downtown. So the 1.5 million is not based on all of these things total. It's really just a number that staff can work within to do some of these improvements and compete with other downtowns and put our money where our mouth is in our downtown area.
Totally agree with that, and also with the lawn, making the great lawn more of a,
Amenitize.
yes,
Put some artwork there, bring it to life.
our arch.
Yeah, arch. Then There's been a lot of comments from citizens in the past that I've received, I'm sure some of y'all have also received, regarding no streetlights down Lakeview Parkway. As y'all are aware, it's dark at night, there's no streetlights. We're kind of like the only city that has decided that we're gonna make our one major thoroughfare dark at night. So this is a tough pill, this is a gut punch, because it's not cheap. I've got a quote for this. This is based on, right now there's no conduit median, so there's no ability to power streetlights. All that would have to be installed, bored and installed, including the concrete pads for each pole. You're talking about 90 lights, so 90 connections. That's gonna be about $3 million.
That's for water work.
That's from the entire length of Lakeview Parkway.
Like the Main Street.
And all of it. Is there? TxDOT won't, but we've already asked, and they say that we meet their requirements by having streetlights at the intersections, but it's not required to have streetlights down the thoroughfare, just the intersections. So they're not gonna. They've already told us no on that. We've asked.
Are there any opportunities for grants from a public safety standpoint of improving visibility?
I don't know
I've
if we can
looked.
answer that, but we can continue to look.
Yeah.
We'll always continue to look.
Yeah. And this is, I'm just speaking from my own research, so the staff still has to do their own, but I've been looking for something that would fit that. I have not found anything related to, that would allow us to spend money on traffic lights, especially the decorative kind, because these are the decorative kind, they're not just your standard ugly pole. Because it's a major thoroughfare, we want it to look decent. And that way, when you're driving on Lakeview Parkway, you know you're in Rowlett when you see these streetlights, but they also accomplish the illumination goal for our thoroughfare at night. But yeah, $3 million is not a small number, but that's based on all of the labor, material, conduit, and power, light poles down the median.
And actually, there are quite a few neighborhoods over on the Rockwall side of Rowlett, on Dow Rock.
Rockwall County side.
Yeah, that have no streetlights at all.
Where? In neighborhoods, you
In
said?
neighborhoods.
Interesting.
Those are dark. No, he's not here. Sure, the police chief would have a comment about that.
Yeah.
There's some off of Cheetah too, Monterey, those streets don't have streetlights in the neighborhood.
They're very, very dark. I was actually afraid to, I was like 5 miles an hour because there were lots of cars and it was pitch black. And so that might make it unfun.
You were the one driving the high beams down the road? Is that what-
That's it. Like squirrels, dogs, whatever. It's just they're narrow sweepers. No lines.
So when I got that quote, I also got a quote for retrofitting existing lights down our major thoroughfares, which are Rowlett Road, Miller Road, and Down Rock Road. So it'd be utilizing these existing poles, but replacing those sodium bulbs with LEDs. And that's 208 lights, which would cost $500,000. Cheap. That includes labor. Whoa, so 1,500 per light, and plus I kind of rounded up just in case. So 500,000 for 208 retrofits. Traffic signal installation for Liberty Grove at President Dorcas Turnpike. That's currently a 4-way stop. It definitely is in need of traffic signals. While that has been recognized in the tax increment investment zone number 4, that any available funding out of that TERS probably would not be sufficient enough for quite a while to pay for those traffic signals. Meanwhile, that issue exists today. Yes.
So TxDOT typically funds the installation of the signal on their corridors. And then if it's a city like us, they would turn it over to us for operation and timing. But we, the city, would have to do the warrant study to justify that light, that signal.
I'm not worried about that. Yeah.
And I believe that it has basically been done as part of the Jackson Shaw TIA.
That was, but through the TERS, it's not gonna be, they're not paying.
They wouldn't pay for the, any ancillary, like, if we, like we had to do at Downlock in 66, we have to relocate utilities or anything like that, no. And that signal really doesn't impact them and their project, as does the one at Merritt Road Interconnector, of
Right,
course.
which isn't as busy right now.
But nevertheless, when they did the TIA, we asked them to include Liberty George Bush as an intersection of study. And their TIA came back saying that location and the Merritt Road location are warranted.
And so what we tell TxDOT to go
We,
signals up?
so
Cause I.
essentially, simplistically, yes, but I don't know if that study meets their formatting and other criteria, so we would have to submit it, and they may have to do some, well, on the Liberty Grove location, I don't think we could hit them up for the costs to amend the warrant study to meet TxDOT requirements. Certainly on the Merritt Road one, we have to do the same thing. They would be responsible for that.
I don't know if, I've never heard it done this way where you can tell TxDOT, hey, we need traffic signals, and they say, okay, here's
Well,
$800,000.
That's what the warrant study is about.
And how much is that? How much would a warrant study be, or to amend the existing? Any idea?
Off the top of my head.
I mean, to me, if this is a TxDOT cost that they're gonna bear, this needs to go near the top of the list of.
Well,
I think it would be best if we have that conversation with TxDOT. I'm used to the TxDOT warrants going through the process for them to evaluate and say yes that a signal's warrant. But as far as the cost conversation, it's typically something that comes through a construction of a project, who's going to pay for what, whether or not that's priority on their list, part of another project or another maintenance item that we're doing. So happy to have that conversation with TxDOT. Just don't
Just add
delay
this to
it.
the list. And
Yeah.
bring the list on.
And that'd be great, that we, y'all.
Thinking of it. That's why we're asking.
And, I just put here 900,000 because
Are you thinking about just the east side of George Bush or both those intersections?
it'd be both, yeah. Merritt Road, as you know, is currently kind of freeway and,
That's hard, that's a hard one.
yeah. There's not much cross traffic now. There will be when Merritt Road connects to Liberty Grove. But, for now, Liberty Grove is really the one that is a problem.
Yeah, it's a major issue.
Yeah.
I would really also like to see some sort of boat ramp on the east side of Rowlett.
That was part of the discussion regarding, that we've had regarding the TERS that we would potentially create if council so chooses. That could be another identifying project via the TERS.
We'll add it to this list and you guys can debate it.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Let's see. Oh, automatic floodgates, got a quote for that at about 290, so 300,000. These are floodgates that we have at Main Street in the Trestle, Springfield Park, and Castle Drive. Currently, staff has to go out there, and anytime it rains, go out there while it's raining and close those gates manually. This technology, it has a flood gauge. When the gauge is hit, the gates close automatically, and there are lights attached to it that will flash, telling drivers don't hit my gate. So, yeah,
And a signal all the way up at the intersection before you turn down the road, good.
maybe.
Not good once you turn.
Yeah. So those are, and I'll send you all that quotes. And then that was.
What about an overhang sensor for the Main Street Bridge?
So actually, that's already. Thank you, Ms. Devaney, for fixing that. She told me this morning that they were able to get flashing lights for Main Street at the Trestle. That's a
Mention why we told you. We told you because you raised the issue to us.
right.
So we were pointing.
Yeah, no, that she was answering my question.
I don't even want to think you're giving us instruction.
No. I had asked if it's possible to get some kind of flashing light there to warn drivers overhead, large.
2 vehicles were stuck in the last 60 days.
Right. And so she responded back and said that they're ordering something to do the lights, flashing lights.
Will that be closer toward 66 to allow, or to notify, I mean, I don't want to get too much into the weeds on it, but
I don't know the specific locations of which they're being deployed, but happy to look into that and let you know. I know that we have ordered them, it's going to take time, and then we're gonna deploy them. But I actually have not been to that specific area yet, so I can't see.
so if we need some poles that come out of the ground.
Yeah.
You cannot go.
Oh, yes, well, we will take that into consideration.
No,
when
I'm
we're
being
looking at
facetious, I'm
them.
sorry. It's just, you could, it seems like you could put all kinds of signs there and drivers will still find their
Still
way
people,
into,
sure.
Well,
the issue.
there's that YouTube channel where the guy just has a camera that faces a bridge, and it doesn't matter. They have every device known to man created to warn people not to drive through when a truck is there. They still do it. So, but this is us doing our due diligence
Yeah.
to warn them, you know.
Well, I mean, it's a tremendous public safety drain to get, our resources out there to help these drivers get unstuck and monitor traffic flow and all that stuff. It's
And there's no place to wish around.
right. So if you get too far down Main, you're essentially stuck.
Yeah, so you turn around and usually the rest of it.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But yeah, you know, those flashing lights, the solar flashing lights they're not really that expensive. So it worked out.
Oh,
That's all. Anybody else?
okay. I thought you were talking about more things.
I'm sure I'll have more later.
Yeah, both of them.
All right.
So what was the total of that?
Yeah, but like,
The floodgate frequency.
So I guess the only question I would have to that, Mayor, is if there's a specific time frame or a date we can get that information back so that we can prepare in advance of the meeting on the 5th.
I can get you the quotes that I've gotten.
You can, but
Refer to
I
everyone
know
there,
Councilman
right.
Bowers, anybody else who
Wish
has
list.
anything on a wish list for their particular time frame, we can receive that so we can try to work to do our due diligence, bring that information back to you.
Good question. I would say, let me look at the calendar real quick. I want to give you all ample to, ooh. Yeah, February 5th is coming that way. How about we say, to give y'all enough time to do due diligence, how about Monday the 29th in the business?
Oh, good luck.
That's great, thank you.
So Monday the 29th, if y'all, between now and then, come up with something to add to the list, let them know before Monday the 29th.
You would just send it to the three of us, please? That's all.
Okay. Anything, oh, Deb, no, everybody can email us.
What's that, sir?
Nothing, you're gonna email us the date.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I did email you the list of all the parks projects, I'm not sure if you had a chance.
Did you send it to council?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right. I finished at 3:30, that's pretty good. With that, there's no other items to discuss, no other questions that I hear, so we are adjourned at 3:28 p.m. Thank y'all.
The 20 minutes.
Which one?
Wish list items.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.